Okay, so let's begin then. A very good afternoon, everyone. I can see 23 participants has joined this session. A warm welcome to the Analyst Stack program and to this specific session on the auto and auto ancillaries. My name is Saharsh Damani. I serve as the Chief Executive of the Federation of Automobile Dealers Associations, also known as FADA, which is the national body of India's automobile dealers. We represent 15,000 dealerships having 30 plus thousand retail outlets across the length and breadth of the country. Which means that, for the next 2 hours, you have with you someone who lives inside this industry every single day. The showrooms, the workshops, the data, the policy meetings, you name it. And that's what I've been doing since last 10 years, almost a decade. Before we begin, I would want to lay down a very three small ground rules, so that our session is, enjoyed in the most apt manner. One, this is, even though you are on a webinar session, I am assuming, please assume that this is not a webinar, it is a classroom. And I will keep asking you questions in between, and your answers should come in the chat box, so that it is not a monologue. We have a continuous dialogue. And the more you type, the better this session becomes, because it's a 2 hour long session. I don't want you to, feel sleepy or bored, so that the activities must keep on coming. Second, today there are no silly questions, okay? Whether you are a 22 years old or a 42 years old, I am not sure about the age profile, but I'm assuming that there are folks who have joined who are in multiple age brackets. Whether you are doing your CFA or you are working somewhere or you are starting afresh, we are all starting from the same line, especially for the auto industry and auto ancillary discussion. And three, read the line at the bottom of this slide. This session is educational material only, and not any investment advice would be given here. I will teach you how to analyze the auto and ancillary industry. What you buy is your own homework, and what you advise to your clients once you are out of this program, this is where I will prepare you for. So, uh, let us warm up the chat. I would want to see some chats coming in. So type in one line the very first vehicle your family ever owned, maybe the brand, the model. So if you ask me, mine was an Ambassador Mark III. So do share your first family vehicle. Let me see, the kind of varieties of vehicles you have been driving. Great. Ford Fiesta was an excellent car. Okay, Tata Punch, which means you are a new age vehicle owner. Bajaj Vespa, great, Gaurav. Vento, Honda, Dodge. Oh wow, Parth, thank you. Great. So I'm getting a lot of answers. Toyota Qualis, again, a very well-made vehicle. Tata Sierra, the new one or the old one? Alkesh? Old one, great. Okay. Okay, so let's stop. I've received a lot of answers. Great. So folks have a lot of experience in terms of the vehicles which they have. Okay. So, so I'll make a promise for the next 2 hours. Assuming that we end sharp at 4:05, 4 or 4:05, it's a 2 hour session. And by 4, you'll be able to read this sector the way a professional analyst does. That's my aim, to make you teach. You will also know which numbers to trust. बहुत सारे numbers है auto में, है ना? Retail है, wholesale है. Which numbers to question. Also, what makes an auto company profitable, how a dealership actually earns, how a component manufacturer, component maker, the ancillary, can grow even faster than the car maker it supplies to. and how to value each of them differently. Ultimately, इसी चीज के लिए हम यहाँ आज आए हैं, right? And I promise you will never again confuse a wholesale number with a retail number. Okay, so let's begin then. So why the auto sector matters to each and every person in this entire analyst field, why it matters to the economy, why it matters to an Aam Aadmi, why it matters to the government, why it matters to the FIIs, the hedge funds. Okay, so let me start with a question. I am asked at many conferences, with so many sectors to track, the conferences which I attend in the financial world. A lot of analyst folks keep on inviting us. Why should a young analyst spend time on automobile? And my question, my answer is very simple. बहुत simple, सरल answer है. And this is also the story of this slide. Uh, the auto sector is a proxy for the Indian economy itself. It is the single window through which you can watch six macro forces operating at the same time. I'm sure you would have done a lot of industry analysis right now, different industries. But believe me, once you are through this 2 hour session, you will be in love with auto. And if you love vehicle, if you love engine, if you love the sound, then I'm sure it will be like a cherry on the cake. So roughly, if I give you in terms of numbers, 7% of India's GDP rides on this industry. It is one of the largest chunks of our manufacturing economy because 49% of India's manufacturing GDP rests solely on the automobile sector. Now, these are some numbers which are mind-boggling numbers. I'm sure you have a pen and copy also with you. So do note down these numbers. 7% of India's GDP, 49% of India's manufacturing GDP comes from auto. You know, this industry also directly and indirectly supports close to 3.5 crore livelihoods, from the steel plant to the showroom to the mechanic in your neighborhood. There is a big value chain of employment generation which happens. India today is the world's third largest passenger vehicle market, the second largest tractor market, and the biggest two-wheeler market on this planet. And when India grows, this sector grows first. And when stress builds anywhere in the economy, this sector feels it first. It is basically the ECG machine of the Indian economy, and we call auto as the barometer of India's overall health check. So, I have a question. Before I decode the six boxes on this slide, tell me in the chat, if RBI will do, interest rate cuts, which vehicles start selling more and why? According to you, apply your brain, generic thought process, and tell me what will impact, what will not get impacted. So 30 seconds, quickly, if you can share your answers in the chat. Two-wheeler sale increases, two-wheeler commercial vehicle. Okay. So let me answer you. The majority of the new passenger vehicles and almost all commercial vehicles in India are bought on credit. If I talk about passenger vehicles itself, 80% of the cars which are sold on road today is bought against a loan, and 60% of two-wheelers which are bought today is against a loan. So the entry-level motorcycles, the small hatchback, like the Wagonars of the world, you know, track the bottom of the income pyramid, while SUVs and premium bikes track the top. So one sector, both ends of the pyramid. Consumption upgrade when a family moves from a hatch to an SUV. or from a 100 cc commuter bike to a 350 cc Royal Enfield. That is India's consumption story in motion, and you can count it every month. Credit availability. Most new vehicles are financed. As I said, 60% of two-wheelers are financed. 80 plus percent of passenger vehicles are financed. So auto retail is a live read on retail credit appetite. If you see commodity prices, steel, aluminum, copper, rubber, and crude all flow into the cost of a vehicle. So metal prices show up in auto margins, but it comes with a lag. Again, in terms of the government policy, if you see GST, emission norms, safety rules, EV subsidies, one budget announcement can basically redraw the entire demand curve. And अगर आप FY26 देखोगे, so it has already proved it, because you on 22nd of September GST rate rationalization happened, and see the kind of growth the auto industry was having. Pre-September 22nd, the overall industry was growing at 2 to 3% on a monthly basis. Post 22nd September, every month the industry has been growing 20 plus percent. So one GST tweak can make such a big difference. As you and the sixth, if I actually left it out, the sixth is technological disruption. You are seeing so much technological disruption happening. The BS4 to BS6 jump happened. Then, a lot of buzz on the flex fuel vehicle. A lot of states are now bringing out their EV policy. So the EV transition is not coming. Basically, it is already here. It is uneven, and it is again rewiring the entire supply chain. And all this we will discuss, in the slides to come. So I'll want you to keep on writing, to keep on taking notes, and I'll also want to note down one specific point, which I think will help you going forward. So I'll dictate this. If you can note it down, auto is one sector. I'll dictate it slowly. Automobile is one sector, but six macro dials. Income, consumption, credit, commodities, policy, and technology. And this is why analysts who master auto can read the entire economy. Have you written it? Great. So one sector, six trigger points. Now, because this is a financial program, nothing ends. There's no session which will be without numbers. So look at the industry at a glance. And these are FY26 numbers, the latest numbers as on date. Even though 6 महीने हो गए हम FY27 में, अभी already we are into 6 months. So let the size of the industry, and you understand this, and as we do, I'll teach you the first discipline of auto analyst. Now, first, the calendar year. When I say FY26, I mean April. Obviously, it is April 25 to March 26, the financial year that closed 6 months back. So bring it into your head, and because mixing up fiscal quarters is the most common, level of rookie error in this sector. We've seen people getting confused in CY, FY, the kind of time duration they're tracking. So you already have the numbers in front of you. Give me the answer in terms of which segment has grown fastest in FY26 on the wholesale level. होलसेल लेवल में सबसे ज्यादा क्या ग्रो किया है FY26 में? इज इट द पीवी, पैसेंजर व्हीकल, टू व्हीलर, टू डब्ल्यू, सीवी, commercial vehicle, which are trucks and buses? Three W is three wheelers, the auto rickshaws. Someone is saying PV, someone is saying two wheeler, three wheeler, two wheeler, three wheeler, TW. So, so most people guess PV or two wheeler, some guess three wheelers also, because cars basically dominate the entire headlines, which is there in the newspapers. Now look at the slide. Passenger vehicle has grown, they are at about 46 lakh units in wholesale, which are up 7.9%. A record again, But if you do all the comparatives, it is the slowest, has shown the slowest growth among all the four. Two wheelers, nearly 2.17 crore units and up around 11%, which is the giant of the markets in terms of unit. Two wheelers constitute around 70 plus percent of the total volumes in the auto. Commercial vehicle about 10.8 lakh, which is up 12.6%. And three wheelers up 12.8%. The correct answer is therefore three wheelers, not two wheelers or passenger vehicles. Okay. So again, concentration has to be absolutely at its best. Don't be in rush of giving the answers first. Understand the numbers and then reply. What I asked was which grew highest in terms of wholesales, right? So you should have looked at the wholesale growth rate. So FY26 was a record year across every category, and total domestic wholesale crossed 2.83 crore vehicles, which in entirety, the total industry grew by 10.4%. Now notice something else also is on the slide. Every tile carries two numbers, the wholesale number and the retail number. And this is where the first trick gets applied. A lot of numbers come into auto industry. The first question as an analyst, you need to ask them, is it the wholesale number or is it the retail number? I'll cover everything, Gruner. Gruner, I'll cover everything, don't worry. So the wholesale number and the retail number. Passenger vehicle wholesale is 46.4 lakhs. But if you look at our number, which is the FADA retail, the passenger vehicle number is 49.1 lakh. Three wheelers wholesale number is 8.4 lakhs. But if you see the retail is 14.2 lakhs. Now, this is a puzzle, right? Park it in your mind. In 15 minutes, we'll see the gap, which will become the single most useful trick I teach to you today. So, and why FY26 is such a blockbuster? Three tailwinds arrive together. Remember the last slide, there were six boxes. I talked about GST, I talked about a lot of other things, tech. So, if you see three tailwinds arrive together in FY26, क्या थे वो? एक तो मैंने ऑलरेडी आपको बताया था. Yes, Aryanth, correct. GST rate rationalization in September made vehicles meaningfully cheaper. So I will tell you that full story in the forthcoming part. Personal income tax relief also was one big trigger, right? 12 lakh rupees of income, which is free. And then the third trigger was RBI's repo rate cuts made EMI lighter. याद करिए आरबीआई ने कितने रेट कट किए थे. तो जितने रेट कट हुए उतने ही ईएमआई आपकी गिरती गई, राइट? सो इफ कार लोन वाज एट 9% and if there were 1% or 1.25% of rate cut, accordingly your car loan EMI also came down. So policy, which is GST, income, which is income tax rate cuts, tax free of 12 lakh income, and the credit reduction, the RBI rate cut. Three out of the six dials, if you remember from the previous slides, came into play and all were positive. तो अगर छह में से तीन सबसेट्स आपके पॉजिटिव है और है ना, तीनों पॉजिटिव थे, राइट? सो ओवरऑल दिस टर्न द इंटायर ऑटो इंडस्ट्री इनटू अ पॉजिटिव इंडस्ट्री. नाउ दिस इज द इंडिया ग्रोथ स्टोरी रिटन इन व्हीकल रजिस्ट्रेशन. जो मैंने लिंक किया था, ऑटोमोबाइल इज द बैरोमीटर ऑफ इंडियाज इकोनॉमी, इंडियाज हेल्थ चेक. क्यों है? इस कारण से है क्योंकि अगर इंडिया में छह में से तीन कैटेगरीज आपके पॉजिटिवली इम्पैक्ट कर रहे हैं ऑटो को, hence auto is growing, right? In vehicle registrations, if you see the difference between wholesale and retail numbers were running much faster compared to the wholesale numbers. मतलब ग्राउंड पे कस्टमर्स ज्यादा बाय कर रहे थे. नाउ वन मोर नंबर बिफोर वी मूव अहेड, विच इज द ऑटो कंपोनेंट्स इंडस्ट्री. ऑटो कंपोनेंट्स क्या है? जो एंसिलरीज बनाती है, जो स्पेयर पार्ट्स बनाती है एंड सप्लाई करती है ऑटो ओईएम्स को, राइट? कोई स्टेयरिंग बनाता है, कोई हेडलाइट बनाता है, कोई वायरिंग हार्नेस बनाता है, कोई इंजन बनाता है. सो दीज आर कॉल्ड ऑटो कंपोनेंट players, right? Auto ancillaries. Yes, Motherson Sumi is one of them. The ancillaries clocked 3.56 lakh crore of revenue in just the first half of FY26, with exports of over $12 billion in 6 months. For the full year FY25, that industry, stood at 6.73 lakh crore. Now remember, as I said, behind every vehicle manufacturer stands a component industry nearly as large as the OEM industry. And again, we will spend some serious time in auto ancillaries also. Okay, first look at this slide. It is from FY25 to FY26, 11 years run for passenger vehicle, two-wheeler, commercial vehicle and three-wheeler. ये जो एक्रोनिम्स है आप लोग को याद करने बहुत जरूरी है. पीवी मीन्स पैसेंजर व्हीकल्स विच आर कार्स, टू डब्ल्यू इज टू व्हीलर्स, सीवी इज commercial vehicles which includes trucks and buses, 3W is all the three wheelers, e-rickshaws. So क्या दिख रहा है इस स्लाइड में आपको? The single most important chart for understanding what kind of animal this sector really is. हम जो ऑटो इंडस्ट्री की बात करते हैं ना, सिर्फ ऑटो इंडस्ट्री अच्छा कर रहा है, नहीं अच्छा कर रहा है बोलने से काम नहीं चलेगा. दैट्स अ वेरी वेग आंसर. यू हैव टू बी वेरी स्पेसिफिक. उमेश, आई विल गिव इनफ ऑप्शंस टू आस्क क्वेश्चन, हाँ, but let me just go with the flow. I have plans for asking, giving you time for questions. So this is the 11 years of which data? The FADA retail data, not the wholesale, which is actual registration. अब actual registration क्या होता है आपको ये समझना चाहिए. There are two sets of data. One is wholesale and the second is retail. Now retail data, there's a story behind it. Globally अगर आप देखोगे, and if I go until 2018 November, इंडिया में कभी रिटेल डेटा नहीं आता था. Every country, if you look around us, used to give retail numbers. बट हमारा देश एक ऐसा अद्भुत देश था जहां पे सिर्फ होलसेल पे ही सारा डिस्कशन होता था. अब होलसेल क्या है? फैक्ट्री डिस्पैच. इंडिया में ऑटो इंडस्ट्री इज अ बी टू बी इंडस्ट्री. बी टू बी कैसे? जब ओईएम क्या है? ओरिजिनल इक्विपमेंट मैन्युफैक्चरर, लाइक मारुति, लाइक हुंडई, लाइक एनी अदर ऑटो मैन्युफैक्चरर, जब वो अपना प्रोडक्ट शिप करते हैं टू ऑटो डीलर्स, इट इज अ बी टू बी ट्रांजैक्शन. मतलब उन्होंने शिप कर दिया, बिल बिल कर दिया ऑटो डीलर्स को, तो उनके एंड से वो सेल हो गया. करेक्ट. अब जब उनके एंड से सेल हो गया, उन्होंने रजिस्टर कर लिया, भाई हमारी तो इतनी गाड़ी बिक गई. दिस इज द होलसेल नंबर. बट जब हम और आप गाड़ी खरीदते हैं, तब एक्चुअल ग्राउंड रियलिटी समझ में आती है, राइट? कितना डिमांड है, कितना कंजम्पशन है। अगर हम नहीं खरीदे और ये सिर्फ ओईएम होलसेल पे होलसेल करते गए, तो वो गाड़ियां रिटेल नहीं हो रही है ना, राइट? वो सिर्फ होलसेल हो रही है। जब तक एंड कस्टमर गाड़ी नहीं खरीदता है तब तक एक्चुअली गाड़ी नहीं बिकती है। सो रजिस्ट्रेशन, रिटेल रजिस्ट्रेशन आप उसको मानेंगे जब गाड़ी बिक गई, टैक्सेस पे हो गए, रोड टैक्स पे हो गया, रजिस्ट्रेशन टैक्स पे हो गया, इंश्योरेंस हो गया गाड़ी पर, उस पर HSRP नंबर प्लेट फिक्स हो गया। HSRP इज हाई रेजोल्यूशन, हाई रेजोल्यूशन, HS, हाई रेजोल्यूशन रजिस्ट्रेशन प्लेट, हाई सिक्योरिटी रजिस्ट्रेशन प्लेट, सॉरी। जब तक HSRP नंबर प्लेट अफिक्स नहीं होता है, इट इज इलीगल फॉर अ व्हीकल टू कम ऑन रोड। सो जब ये सारे प्रोसेस हो जाते हैं, इसके बाद जब गाड़ी रास्ते पे आती है, विच इज एक्चुअल सेल, विच इज एक्चुअल रजिस्ट्रेशन, राइट? दीज आर द डिफरेंसेस विच you'll have to understand. यस, होलसेल कैन ऑल्सो बी मैनुपुलेटेड, करेक्ट अक्षय। कैसे मैनुपुलेट हो सकता है? अगर ओईएम ने अपना सेल ज़्यादा दिखाना है तो उसको क्या करना है? बहुत सिंपल चीज़ है, उसने अपने डीलर्स बढ़ा लेने हैं। अगर आज उसके पास, एक कंपनी ए के पास 100 डीलर है, राइट, और उसने 110 डीलर कर लिया, तो उसके लिए तो सेल बढ़ गई ना, बिकॉज उन 10 एडिशनल डीलर्स को भी उसको इन्वेंट्री सप्लाई करना पड़ेगा। अगर इन्वेंट्री नहीं रहेगा डीलर के पास तो वो सेल कैसे करेगा? So which means wholesale, yes, can be manipulated. The retail numbers are the actual numbers which are sold on the ground. Those numbers are the actual numbers on which every calculation an analyst should do, right? So coming back, so we went a bit off topic, but this was important for all of you to understand. The single most chart for understanding what kind of animal this sector is. This is 11 years of FADA retail data, actual registrations from FY25 to FY26, with every segment indexed to FY29, FY19 at 100. Okay. I assume all of you know indexation and everything, so I'm not getting into it. Indexing, but still, indexing simply means FY19, the pre-COVID peak. प्री-कोविड पीक था तो हमने वहां सबको 100 का वैल्यूएशन दे दिया अभी। एंड एवरी अदर ईयर इज मेजर्ड अगेंस्ट इट। सो नाउ रीड द पाथ एंड नॉट द एंड पॉइंट। आप पाथ देखो किस तरह चार्ट मूव कर रहा है। दिस इज ओके, फुल स्क्रीन। दिस इज फुल स्क्रीन अक्षय, आई कांट जूम इट मोर देन दिस। यू कैन जूम इट पिंच करके आप जूम करो ना अपने स्क्रीन पर। ओके, लुक एट द फोर लाइन्स। Which segment do you think fell the hardest in the COVID years? Question. And take a guess of at how long, take a guess at how low it went. If FY20, FY19 was 100. Look at all the four lines. Which segment do you think fell the hardest in the COVID years? And take a guess at how low it went if FY19 was 100. Three wheelers, PV, three wheelers. Correct. Three wheelers is the right answer. 63% collapse. Yes, yes, yes. Great. You're all now getting the pulse of the industry. Good. Okay. Stop writing in the chat. I got all the answers. Now watch the recovery because each line tells a different story. Drop आपने देखा, अब recovery देखो. Three wheelers was down to 37 and then nearly a five-fold rise from that tough to a record FY26. Correct? ये क्यों हुआ? Because it has been powered by the last mile mobility. And we shall see हाउ इलेक्ट्रिफिकेशन हैज ऑल्सो इम्पैक्टेड, हम देखेंगे आगे की स्लाइड्स में. कमर्शियल व्हीकल -53% and a record FY26 again. Now, this is the purest boom bust cycle in the sector. Passenger vehicle, steadiest climb at 146. And now the sobering one, which is the two-wheelers. So, the most common vehicle in India fell to 68% and crossed its FY19 peak only in FY26 at 109. समझ आ रहा है? 70+% व्हीकल्स जो इंडिया में बिकते हैं, टू व्हीलर्स बिकते हैं, उसका पीक था FY19 और उसका नेक्स्ट पीक कब बना? FY26. तो कितने साल लगे FY टू व्हीलर्स को अपना प्रीवियस रिकॉर्ड तोड़ने में? नाउ रीड दिस अगेन. India's largest vehicle segment took an entire decade, in fact, decade plus 11 years, to decisively reclaim its old peak. Now, if you have modeled two wheelers in FY 2019, assuming steady growth, you would become wrong for the 10 straight years, right? मॉडलिंग करते हो ना, सीखे हो कि नहीं मॉडलिंग? एक्सेल में डालकर, अब तो क्लॉड कर देता है सब कुछ. एस्टिमेट लगा दो, 4% ग्रोथ चलता रहेगा साल दर साल. टू व्हीलर में करते तो क्या होता? बैंड बज जाती, पिंक स्लिप मिलता, बोलता है टाटा बाय बाय, अपने घर जाओ, आप लायक नहीं हो इसके. करेक्ट. सो दिस इज वन मोर नुआंस यू हैव टू कीप इन माइंड. मॉडलिंग इज बेसिकली, यू नो, सर आंख दिमाग बंद करके अगर आप चाइनीज मैथ्स करोगे तो अगले दिन टाटा बाय बाय हो जाएगा इंडस्ट्री से. Now, hence, so there are a lot of numbers which I've talked about, a lot of auto-specific gyan I have given you. So time to write an important statement. So please take your pen and notebook. Now you can write, auto cycles are real. Auto cycles are real, deep, and asymmetric. Okay. Auto cycles are real, deep, and asymmetric. And each segment runs its own cycle. And each segment runs its own cycle. Never make a single auto sector call. Never make a single auto sector call because there is no such thing. Correct? Now, how will you differentiate between a rookie analyst and an analyst who has done an Analyst Stack program? अगर कोई आपको रास्ते में मिलेगा, रूकी एनालिस्ट बोलेगा ऑटो सेक्टर बहुत बूम पे चल रहा है, ले लो ऑटो सेक्टर के स्टॉक्स, तो आप क्या करोगे उस पर? ये बात सुनकर क्या करोगे? क्या रिएक्शन होगा? सिर्फ एक रिएक्शन होगा, हा हा. दैट्स इट. ओके. जस्ट वन रिएक्शन, हा हा, नथिंग मच. Now, why did this, again coming back to the slide, why did this happen to two wheeler? इतना टाइम क्यों लगा? जस्ट डोंट आंसर, होल्ड दिस क्वेश्चन इन योर माइंड. यू नो, अब आप रिकलेक्ट करो जो 6 बॉक्सेस हमने शुरुआत में डिस्कस किए थे, उसके साथ अगर आप कनेक्ट करोगे, यू विल गेट द आंसर बाय योरसेल्फ. बिकॉज द आंसर इन्वॉल्व्स रेगुलेशन, it involves insurance cost because there was a lot of insurance price increases, mandatory 3-year, 5-year insurance had kicked in. Rural income was falling because of COVID. because of less monsoon during those years, and electrification had started coming in. ठीक है, इलेक्ट्रिफिकेशन का एडवेंट अराउंड 2020 से होना चालू हुआ था. And every one of those threads gets pulled into the next, again, 90 minutes going forward. हम इन सब पे बात करेंगे. So for now, just respect the chart. This sector basically rewards patience, and punishes any assumption. So a lot of patience is required. So, so hence, an auto analyst is an analyst who has done various other sector specific analysis and then has jumped into auto because of the knowledge, because of the experience. You need to have a lot of patience to analyze the auto sector. ओके, ये सब तो अभी हम बाउंड्री पर गोल गोल घूम रहे थे. नाउ वी आर एंटरिंग द फील्ड. पार्ट वन क्या है? व्हाट इज द इंडस्ट्री स्ट्रक्चर एंड इकोसिस्टम? सो now we are entering the field, and now we will begin the analysts work properly. आपका जो काम है अब यहां से चालू होता है. पार्ट वन क्या है? स्ट्रक्चर. सो हियर इज रूल नंबर वन फॉर ऑटो एनालिसिस, and I want you to hold me accountable to it for the rest of your session. As I said, auto is not one business. It is a cascade of businesses where a company sits on the value chain, predicts most of its economics. Now place the company on the map first. Only then are you allowed to touch the valuation multiple. ठीक है? You'll understand in the deeper next few slides. Now this is the auto value chain, node by node. Now think of this slide as the supply chain of a Bombay में थाली मिलती है ना. Restaurants are there are a lot of restaurants which give good thalis. So assume it from that point of view. Now before the thali reaches your table, सबसे पहले क्या होता है? The grain is grown, it has been milled, सफाई होती है, सब पैक होके फिर ट्रांसपोर्ट होता है. देन वो रेस्टोरेंट आके उसकी कुकिंग होती है, फिर उसकी प्लेटिंग होती है, और फिर वो सर्व होता है आपकी टेबल पे, राइट? नाउ दिस इज एग्जैक्टली नोड बाय नोड हाउ एन ऑटो इंडस्ट्री वर्क्स. ईच प्लेयर इन दैट चेन अर्न्स अ वेरी डिफरेंट मार्जिन, राइट? जो किसान है वो अलग कमाएगा, जो सफाई कर रहा है धान की, ग्रेन्स की, उसका अलग मार्जिन है. जो ट्रांसपोर्ट कर रहा है उसका अलग मार्जिन है. जो शेफ कुक कर रहा है उसको अलग तरह का इनकम मिलता है. फिर प्लेटिंग, ठीक है, प्लेटिंग तो शेफ ही कर देता है आजकल. और जो वेटर है जो सर्व करता है उसकी इनकम अलग होती है. सिमिलरली इन ऑटो इंडस्ट्री ऑल्सो, अ व्हीकल इज एग्जैक्टली द सेम. नाउ लेट अस वॉक द चेन फ्रॉम लेफ्ट टू राइट. ओके, सो ऑटो इंडस्ट्री में सबसे पहले कौन आएगा? द मेटल मैन्युफैक्चरर्स like steel from SAIL, Tata Steel, JSW, aluminium from Hindalco, rubber from some company, plastic parts from some company, glass from some other company, paint from some other company, right? Now, ये सब क्या है? These are all commodity businesses which are what? Having cyclical margins, correct? ये पढ़ा होगा आपने. No pricing power over the car maker, correct? कार मेकर का प्राइसिंग पावर है क्या इसके ऊपर? नो, राइट? कभी चाइना ने डंप कर दिया तो प्राइस अलग हो जाएगा, कभी चाइना को डंप करना नहीं अलाउ हुआ तो प्राइसिंग अलग हो जाएगा, बिकॉज बीइंग अ कमोडिटी, बीइंग अ साइक्लिकल मार्जिन इंडस्ट्री. इसके बाद कौन आता है? द टीयर टू एंड टीयर थ्री सप्लायर्स, जो स्टैंपिंग करते हैं, फॉजिंग करते हैं, कास्टिंग करते हैं ऑफ द डाइज ऑफ द व्हीकल्स. which are generally small and unorganized players, which basically अगर small है और unorganized है तो उनके margins कैसे रहेंगे? Thin रहेंगे. इसके बाद कौन आते हैं? द टीयर वन सप्लायर्स कौन होते हैं? बॉश, मदरसन, सोना, BLW, राइट? सोना के ऊपर वील डू अ केस स्टडी. और कौन होते हैं टीयर 1 सप्लायर्स? टायर मेजर्स, MRF, एंड द सीएट एंड द lookalikes. Now, these are the companies that supply complete systems directly to a vehicle manufacturer, a vehicle maker, a vehicle OEM, or original equipment manufacturer. Right? These are the terms which you should keep in your mind. OEM is an automaker, auto manufacturer. Now these tier 1 suppliers basically typically earn 8 to 16% EBITDA margins. और इसके बाद कौन आता है? ये सारे पार्ट्स आके जो असेंबली करते हैं OEMs, अपने 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 फैक्ट्रीज में असेंबल करते हैं सबको, राइट? सो नाउ a term you will hear 200 times and I've already said it multiple times. ये OEM किस बाला का नाम है? OEM means, you can note it down, OEM is original equipment manufacturer, which simply means a vehicle maker, right? Maruti, Tata, Mahindra, Bajaj, all these are auto manufacturers, all these are called auto OEMs. Now they design, they assemble and brand the vehicle. Again, they earn in the ballpark range of say 8 to 18% of EBITDA margins. But then they also carry enormous factories. और अगर बड़े बड़े फैक्ट्री है तो उतना ही बड़ा कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर भी होगा इनके पास, राइट? हाँ, OEM के बाद कौन आता है? OEM के बाद इट कम्स इनटू माय कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी, व्हिच इज द डीलर्स वर्ल्ड, ऑटो डीलर्स. एंड जैसा मैंने आपको पहले बताया, द डीलर्स बाय द व्हीकल फ्रॉम एन OEM, इट इज अ B2B बिजनेस. अगर डीलर के पास व्हीकल स्टॉक बच गया तो OEM वापस नहीं लेता है. क्यों नहीं लेता है वो वापस? बिकॉज इट इज अ B2B ट्रांजैक्शन, राइट? It is not a franchisee model. So OEM also own the inventory. सॉरी, OEM इन्वेंट्री रखता है जब तक वो डिस्पैच नहीं करता डीलर्स को, बट जब डीलर्स के पास इन्वेंट्री आ जाती है, सो द इन्वेंट्री एक्चुअली बिकम्स द प्रॉपर्टी ऑफ द डीलर. और डीलर इसको कैसे बाय करता है? दे बेसिकली फंड इट विथ बोरोड मनी. बैंक से चैनल फंडिंग लेते हैं, इन्वेंट्री फंडिंग बोलते हैं, विच इज बेसिकली रेंजिंग फ्रॉम 45 to 60 days. है ना? यस, करेक्ट, चैनल फाइनेंस. And then from dealers, it is getting retailed to all of us, the customers. अब आपको पता है, I spoke about different kind of EBITDA margins across different players. Dealers कितना margin कमाते हैं? They earn anywhere between 2 to 5% EBITDA margin. That's it. And the dealers in India have the thinnest margins on auto products globally. Often half to 1.5% at the net profit level. Okay. Half to 1.5% is the net profit margin. एंड फाइनली डीलर्स के बाद आता है आफ्टर मार्केट. अगेन स्पेयर सर्विस, रिप्लेसमेंट ऑफ टायर्स, बैटरीज. अगर आप ऑथराइज वर्कशॉप पे नहीं जा रहे हो, कोई लोकल गराज पे जा रहे हो, तो लोकल गराज वाला जो सलीम भाई है वो कहाँ से लेता है अपना स्टॉक? आफ्टर मार्केट से लेता है, राइट? आई बीइंग इन दिल्ली, करोल बाग मार्केट इज द बिगेस्ट मार्केट, बिकॉज द व्हीकल मे बी बॉट वंस, है ना, बट इट हैज टू बी मेंटेन फॉर 15 years. At least in Delhi, if it's a diesel vehicle, it has to be maintained for 10 years. If it's a petrol vehicle, it has to be maintained for 15 years. इससे ज़्यादा लाइफ नहीं है दिल्ली में. अदर स्टेट्स आर डिफरेंट, अदर सिटीज आर डिफरेंट, बट दिस इज अ यूनिक केस ऑफ दिल्ली बिकॉज ऑफ द NGT, नेशनल ग्रीन ट्राइब्यूनल, which has made this rule because of the pollutions which we live in. ओके, क्विक टेस्ट। मारू एमआरएफ क्या है? इट्स अ टायर कंपनी, राइट? विच नोड ऑफ दिस चेन डज इट बिलोंग टू? आप बताओ। करेक्ट। ग्रेट। So seems all your bearings are in place. Right answers coming in. Great. Happy. I hope you guys are having an interest. मजा आ रहा ऑटो के बारे में? ओके, आगे और मजा आएगा. वील गो डीप डाइव. वील डू डीप डाइव. You'll enjoy it. So okay. So coming back to the slide. Now the insight that makes the slide worth a fund manager's salary. क्या है ऐसा यूनिक इस स्लाइड में? Look at all where the margins sit. Margins does not rise as you move along the chain. It basically concentrates in the protected nodes, right? Now, two kinds of protection exist in this industry. One is technology protection, which is the tier one whose component the OEM cannot easily resource. Correct? अगर मैं एक प्रोडक्ट बना रहा हूं और वो यूनिक है, मेरी मोनोपोली है, तो ओईएम उसको रिसोर्स नहीं कर पाएगा, राइट? विच इज अ टेक्नोलॉजी प्रोटेक्शन. ऐसे कौन से कंपनीज है? बॉश इज वन ऑफ देम. सोना बीएलडब्ल्यू इज वन अ मोर एंसिलरी कंपनी. एक ये हो गया. दूसरा क्या हो गया? रिकरेंस प्रोटेक्शन. रिकरेंस प्रोटेक्शन क्या होता है और कहाँ होता है? इट कम्स इन द आफ्टर मार्केट, वेयर द कस्टमर रिटर्न्स टू यू एवरी ईयर. Like a branded tire replacement as a recurrence protection. एक्साइड की जो बैटरी है, that is a recurrence protection. So the assembler in the middle carries the capex and the cyclicity. The protected supplier and the branded aftermarket carry the durable margin, right? When you screen auto stocks after this session, say from tomorrow, Monday, this is the first lens you will need to apply. Okay, this will be the first lens. एनी कंपनी यू थिंक अबाउट, आपको सोचना होगा ये कौन से मोड में फिट हो रहा है, कौन से नोड में इसका मामला बैठ रहा है, राइट? दिस इज वेयर यू विल हैव टू बिगिन. नाउ अगेन, something important for you to write it down. So you can take your pen and pad. Margin concentrates in the protected nodes. Okay. Margin concentrates in the protected nodes. टेक्नोलॉजी प्रोटेक्शन, ब्रैकेट में लिखो आप टियर वन, एंड recurrence protection, again write it in the bracket after market. Place the company before you price it. Okay. Margin concentrates in a protected in the protected nodes. One is technology protection, which are the tier one suppliers, and second is the recurrence protection, which is the aftermarket. Place the company before you price it. Okay. Now moving ahead. I've already talked about this earlier, but again, because it is in the slide, let me quickly run through it. Now, this is the slide, it's closest to me because I started releasing the retail numbers in, as I said, in November 2018. Oh, in fact, मैं भूल गया था. I didn't complete it that point of time. So till 2018, it was only the wholesale numbers which India used to release. through the OEMs association, CM. And globally, the practice was that any company, any country which is releasing auto retail numbers were the retail numbers. और इंडिया में वो एनालिस्ट भी कभी नहीं पूछते थे कि आपका होलसेल नंबर तो ये है बट रिटेल में क्या हो रहा है, बिकॉज देयर वाज नो आंसर एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम एंड नो एनालिस्ट वुड आल्सो इवन आस्क. और अगर कोई पूछता भी था, इंटेलिजेंट एनालिस्ट, तो ओईएम उसको अपने दो तीन अच्छे डीलर्स से मिला देता था, जिसको बोलते थे, क्या बोलते थे पता है? ग्राउंड चेक. वो दो तीन डीलर से मिला दिया, डीलर्स ने बोला हाँ सब अच्छा है, तो ग्राउंड चेक हो गया एनालिस्ट का. बट नंबर्स के बेसिस पे कोई कुछ नहीं बात करता था. इन्वेंट्री कितनी है कोई कुछ नहीं बताता था, राइट? और दिस वाज द ईयर व्हेन द आईएलएनएफएस क्राइसिस ब्रोक इन द कंट्री. आप लोग को याद होगा 2018 में आईएलएनएफएस क्राइसिस हुआ था, राइट? एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम व्हेन द नवरात्रिज एंड दिवालीज got over, OEMs were announcing there is 3 to 4% growth in the market across categories. The market was going gung ho. But at our level, we were seeing a degrowth of 6 to 7%. तो डिफरेंस कितना हो गया? 4% ग्रोथ से 6 से 7% डिग्रोथ, 10% का डिग्रोथ दिख रहा था मार्केट में. एंड दिस इज द नंबर विच नो वन वॉज टॉकिंग अबाउट. So even though I was doing a lot of back testing at that point of time to be absolutely sure before we release it, so at that point of time, the total RTOs, which were around 1400, I had the data of 58% of the RTOs. And with that as the base, we started releasing the retail numbers in November 2018. And since then, if you see, there is no auto discussion which happens without the retail numbers. There is no auto discussion which happens without what kind of inventory the industry is sitting on. There is no discussion which happens without the discussion on what is the kind of discounting which is happening in the industry. We'll cover all these things. Discounting kya hota hai, we'll talk about, and how it is impacting. That also we'll talk about. Okay. So this was the brief story about how the retail numbers in India started happening. Now, इसको भी अगर हम वो जैसे आपको थाली वाला एग्जाम्पल दिया था, आई हैव वन मोर एग्जाम्पल फॉर यू. वेडिंग का अगर एनालॉजी देखें हम, राइट? वेडिंग में क्या होता है? द केटरर basically reports how many plates were dispatched to the venue, right? जिसके घर में शादी होती है, वो लड़की के फैमिली वाले काउंटर के बगल में खड़े रहते हैं एक बार काउंट लेने के लिए, भाई प्लेट जितना उसने भेजा उतना आया कि नहीं आया. होता है कि नहीं होता है? हाँ. चुपके से चाचा जी जाके बोलते एक बार प्लेट का काउंट ले लो, कहीं गलत तो नहीं बता रहा है नंबर. सो दिस इज सिंपली द फैमिली बेसिकली counts how many guests have also eaten, क्योंकि प्लेट का काउंट है. ना बोथ आर ऑनेस्ट नंबर्स. जो केटरर ने दिया वो भी एक ऑनेस्ट नंबर है, और जो फैमिली ने काउंट किया वो भी एक ऑनेस्ट नंबर है, राइट? सो दे आर बेसिकली सिंपली क्या कर रहे हैं? दे आर मेजरिंग टू डिफरेंट थिंग्स, है ना? होपफुली एवरीथिंग हैपेंस गुड, बट ऑन अ वन बैड डे क्या होगा? द डिफरेंस बिटवीन देम विल बी द लेफ्ट ओवर फूड, राइट? केटर ने बोला 100 प्लेट लगी, और इधर से हमारे साइड के चाचा जी ने बोला नहीं 75 प्लेट ही खाना उठा. तो बीच का क्या हुआ? 25 प्लेट. वो लेफ्ट ओवर फूड है, राइट? नाउ मैप इट टू दी साइम एंड दी एफएडीए नंबर. साइम, द मैन्युफैक्चरर्स बॉडी, रिपोर्ट्स होलसेल डिस्पैच. होलसेल डिस्पैच मैंने ऑलरेडी आपको पहले बताया था क्या रहता है. Vehicles which are moving from the factory to the dealer's end. Now, this is the caterer's number, right? The manufacturer's optimism कि जितना मैंने गाड़ी पुश कर दिया डीलर को मेरे लिए उतनी सेल हो गई, right? Now, FADA, which is my organization, reports the retail registrations, which are again consolidated from all the RTOs. Okay, so one more thing, at 58%, what we started 2 months back, our coverage is now 100%. So each and every RTO is being reported to us. Any numbers are the true reflection of what India consumes. Now, vehicles that actually reached आरटीओ में क्या होता है, जो गाड़ी रजिस्टर हो गई, विच मीन्स वो गाड़ी कस्टमर के पास पहुंच गई, राइट? नाउ दैट इज द फैमिलीज काउंट, द डिमांड ट्रुथ, कि एक्चुअल कंजम्पशन कितना हुआ, राइट? और ये सब कहाँ होता है? वी वर्कड विथ MORTH, विच इज द मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ रोड ट्रांसपोर्ट एंड हाईवेज. बहुत फेमस मिनिस्टर इसको लीड करते हैं, आजकल बहुत चर्चा में है E20 के कारण, गडकरी जी, है ना? वाहन is a portal managed by MORTH. So we worked with MORTH in terms of building up this portal so that correct registration numbers can be reflected, and there can be a single platform where all the vehicles can be registered. No customer needs to go to the local RTO with the broker, pay grease money, and get its work done. So it's a seamless process which is now working. And Vahan is the, as I said, government's registration ledger itself. अब कोई इसको हमने उनके साथ क्यों काम किया? बिकॉज वी ऑलवेज न्यू दैट अगर हम अपना नंबर्स निकालेंगे, पीपल विल आस्क फॉर ऑथेंटिसिटी. बट अगर ये गवर्नमेंट अपने एंड पे अपना एक पोर्टल बना के ये नंबर्स निकालेगी, तो देयर बी नो क्वेश्चंस आस्क्ड, बिकॉज इट इज द मोस्ट ऑथेंटिक वे ऑफ चेकिंग द ऑथेंटिसिटी ऑफ द रजिस्ट्रेशन नंबर्स, राइट? Hence, as I said, Vahan is the government's registration ledger, which is owned by Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. And this is a public portal. Anyone can go and watch the total registration number at any given point of time. There is no lock-in key. Lot of features are already available for all the analysts, especially tracking auto industry. किसी को एक पैसा देने की जरूरत नहीं है टू ट्रैक द डेटा. होलसेल के लिए आप कंपनी के एनालिस्ट कॉल रिपोर्ट्स देख सकते हो. रिटेल के लिए आवर नंबर्स व्हेन वी डू दी प्रेस रिलीज, इट इज अवेलेबल ऑन आवर वेबसाइट. एंड अगर आपको डैशबोर्ड देखना है वाहन का, दैट वाहन डैशबोर्ड इज ऑल्सो ओपन टू पब्लिक. So you can play around with the dashboard and pull out numbers on your own also. So anyone who's tracking auto does not need even a single paisa to be spent by him in terms of getting the data which needs to be analyzed, right? So I won't say neither CM is wrong nor FADA is wrong. Both are giving their own perspective. So I say this with full responsibility as FADA CEO. A dispatch is a real transaction which is happening between the OEM and the dealer. And the registration is again a real transaction which is happening between a dealer and a customer. But as analysts, you need to understand the ground situation, right? A professional habit is every time you quote an auto number in your report, in an interview, in an exam, you need to name the basis, right? If you say 46.4 lakh PV wholesale, SIAM basis, or 49.1 lakh PV retail on basis of either the FADA number or the Vahan registration, this is how you will have to structure your argument. Okay. So the moment an analyst quotes a volume number without naming the basis, I will immediately know that he knows nothing about the sector. Okay, and then how to lead my discussion with him, whether to give that analyst importance or not. So again, a thinking question for all of you, and you can answer it in the chat box. Suppose SIAM wholesale runs well ahead of FADA retail for 3 to 4 consecutive months. What is physically happening and what may happen next? आपका आंसर क्या है? You can note it, mention it in the chat box. I'll again repeat. Suppose SIAM wholesale runs well ahead of FADA retail for 3 to 4 consecutive months. What is physically happening and what may happen next? Correct, correct, correct. Everyone, all of you are correct. Exactly. Wholesale versus retail gap is the dealer's inventory getting built up, right? And it is the cheapest, note it down, it is the cheapest leading indicator in the entire sector. And as I said, it is free, it is monthly, and it also arrives months before the quarterly results, right? It is free, it is monthly, and it arrives much before the quarterly result. When wholesale when wholesale runs ahead of retail persistently, exactly in the question what I asked you, read it as a coming discount cycle. This is not a strength. This is a weakness, right? आप डिस्काउंट कब देते हो? जब आपका माल नहीं बिक रहा है, प्राइस लोअर करते जाओगे, डिस्काउंटिंग करते जाओगे ताकि स्टॉक लिक्विडेट होता जाए, राइट? Every month, when we as FADA publish our dealer inventory days, it is exactly for the same reason. Now, a question may come, what is the healthy inventory level? What is the parameter, where we can assume that this is going in the unhealthy territory? So, according to us, you can note it down. And this is only for the passenger vehicles, right? Because we right now release inventory only for passenger vehicles. An idle inventory level is 21 days, 2121. Now, this is your benchmark number. Last year, inventory went as high as 85 to 90 days. Now, this is a homework or a research work you will have to do. अगर लास्ट ईयर द इन्वेंट्री वेंट एज हाई एज 85 to 90 days, तो डिस्काउंटिंग का क्या हाल था? डिस्काउंटिंग वॉज एट इट्स पीक. जो प्रोडक्ट लेने जाओ भर भर के डिस्काउंट, कैश डिस्काउंट, नॉन कैश कंपोनेंट डिस्काउंट, free accessories, free insurance. Companies were giving as high as free road tax registration. अगर आप एक मर्सिडीज लोगे तो उसका रोड टैक्स रजिस्ट्रेशन का जो कॉस्ट है, उसमें आप एक 7-8 लाख की गाड़ी खरीद सकते हो. ओके, सो कंपनीज वेंट टू दिस काइंड ऑफ अ डिस्काउंटिंग स्कीम. डू अ रिसर्च. जब 85-90 डेज एफएडीए चीख चीख के बोल रहा था कि इतना इन्वेंट्री बढ़ गया, इसको आप कम करो, ओईएम्स को. लुक एट द एफएडीए रिटेल प्रेस रिलीज ऑन द वेबसाइट fada.in. यू विल फाइंड आवर नरेशन इन एवरी प्रेस नोट. तो उस समय डिस्काउंटिंग की क्या हालत थी, ये आप रिसर्च करना, राइट? सो एज आई सेड, एवरी मंथ we publish our dealer inventory days for exactly this reason. And analysts who watched this gap basically saw 2019 slowdown coming while the quarterly numbers still looked healthy. Okay, आप लोग का काम क्या है? आगे फोरसाइट करना, राइट? आगे कैसा एनवायरनमेंट रहेगा. सो द स्लाइड्स बॉटम लाइन इज वर्थ रिपीटिंग. When two honest data sources disagree, the disagreement itself becomes a signal for all the analysts, right? Again, if you can note down a point of importance, which is name the basic always. Name the basis, sorry, not basic, name the basis always. SIAM is wholesale, SIAM, SIAM is wholesale, FADA is retail, and Vahan is the government's registration, vehicle registration ledger. SIAM is wholesale, FADA is retail, and Vahan, VAHAN, Vahan is the government's vehicle registration ledger. The wholesale minus retail gap is the sector's cheapest leading indicator. Okay. The wholesale minus retail gap is the sector's cheapest retail indicator. So now we come to the part two, which is the dividers, segment overview and industry economics. So if you see part two, you have the map of the businesses now. Now we will study the terrain of demand. Now, two ideas rule this part. Okay, the first is basically segments run on different clocks. We've already seen this earlier. You call the segments and never the sector, right? We have also seen the 11-year chart. It has already proved it. And second is the operating leverage in the industry, which is margins move roughly twice as fast as volume in both directions. And if you keep both in your pocket, you will use them. You will use them in next few minutes. So one is sector segments run on different clocks, and second is operating leverage in this industry, which is margins move roughly twice as fast as volume. We'll see this in the next slides. Okay. Slide 9, this is the segment taxonomy. You have to call it segments and not a sector, right? So 5 segments, 5 different demand engines. Read this table basically like a doctor reads 5 different patients, right? Same hospital, but completely different pulses and completely different treatments to all of them. First is passenger vehicle. This is a discretionary consumer purchase. And the drivers are household income, credit availability, fuel prices, and in a nutshell, it's plain aspiration. Automobile is always an aspirational product, right? A car is basically postponed when confidence dips. Nobody needs a new car, uh, you know, in a bad quarter. A two-wheeler, which is a semi-discretionary and a heavily rural item, you know, the drivers here are basically rural income, the monsoon, petrol prices, because of a commuter earning, say, 25,000 rupees monthly income. Uh, a 2,000 rupee jump in a monthly petrol spend is a budget item, right? It will impact the two-wheelers demand. Commercial vehicles, again, it is not a consumption item at all. A truck is a business investment, right? But only when freight demand or fleet profitability justifies the EMI, which the fleet operator is paying as the EMI costs. CVs are basically therefore the purest economic cyclical which we have. They lead construction infrastructure activities. If you see tractors, it is an agri asset. रबी और खरीफ का इनकम कैसा आ रहा है, what is the MSP the government is announcing every year. इरिगेशन कैसा हो रहा है, मॉनसून कैसा चल रहा है. So on a 3 to 4 year replacement rhythm, this tractor industry basically works upon. और लास्ट में क्या है, थ्री व्हीलर्स, which is the last mile mobility, the workhorse of a gig economy अगर आप बोलोगे तो. Structural है rather than being cyclical, and electrification in this category is happening at an astonishing speed right now. So, so again, the question to you, let's say अगर इस साल कोई ले लेते हैं बिकॉज ऑफ एल नीनो, इट इज अ डेफिशिएंट मानसून. सो अज्यूम अगर हम करें द मानसून, if we see if we assume will disappoint badly this year, then which two segments will feel it first, and which segment will barely notice it? What will be your answer? Correct, Alkesh. Correct. So, so two-wheelers and tractors will of course feel it first, because of what reasons? Because rural cash flows will get impacted, right? Premium passenger vehicle will have no impact because uh, XUV 700 owner or a BMW or a Mercedes owner, living in Gurgaon does not track rainfall, right? If so उनके लिए कोई इम्पैक्ट नहीं होगा. अगर आप सीवी देखते हो तो सीवी में ना, रूरल सीवी, रूरल एलसीवीज विल फील इट, बट एलसीवी मींस लाइट कमर्शियल व्हीकल. बट एमएनएचसीवी क्या होता है? मीडियम एंड हेवी कमर्शियल व्हीकल, which basically, they track the freight and infra and not the rain. So नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट अगर आएगा तो रूरल एलसीवी में आएगा, ट्रैक्टर में आएगा, एंट्री लेवल टू व्हीलर में आएगा. इफ देयर विल बी नो इम्पैक्ट कमिंग इन, इट विल बी द niche passenger vehicle segment, which will not have any impact. It will be the MNHCV segment, which will not have any impact because they track different parameters. So if you look at the bottom strip of this slide, again, the same 7 years from FY19 to FY26, and the compound growth rates differ by segment, and by data basics. On retail, if you see, PV is compounding about 5.5%, two-wheelers barely 1%, three-wheeler around 8%. Now, again, if you see, these are different clocks running at different speed. So, as an analyst who says auto demand is strong, basically has told nothing, right? As you are part of the analyst track program, what you guys will say is CV retail is inflecting while entry level two wheeler is still soft, and if you say this, then you have told everything. This will be a difference between a rookie analyst and a good analyst. Correct? Okay, now we are running a bit short of time. I am going into that story mode for quite a long time. So we'll have to be a bit quick, otherwise we'll overshoot. So the next slide basically talks about the PV premiumization, the profit pool uh, basically moves up. So again, if I do a survey with you guys, out of every 100 new cars sold in India today, how many are SUVs or UVs? What is your answer? Quick, 30-second. Yeah. So the Lavang was correct, exactly 65%. Alkesh given a range of 60 to 70%. Kapil has said 55. The correct answer is 65. Roughly two out of every three new passenger vehicles sold in India today is a utility vehicle. A decade ago, that share was barely one third. It used to be the season of sedan, but that sedan has now converted to UVs and SUVs. Now, this is the single most profitable trend in Indian auto, and it has a name. What is it called? It is called premiumization. मतलब आप कितने प्रीमियम कैटेगरी में जाते जा रहे हो, and what is the stake of the premiumization in the passenger vehicles category. So one technical footnote, for the people who basically are like devil is in the detail. UV here is the term invented by CM. They have UV, SUV, all the terms which they have invented. UV means utility vehicle, right? And SUVs plus MPVs, the share looks a few points lower if you use, narrow definitions. And basically name the basics as always. So there is UV, there is SUV, there is MPV. You'll have to understand all these definitions. So yes, MPV is multi-purpose vehicle. So if you remember, when we started the session, someone said Mazda, someone said Splendor, someone said Maruti 800, Chetak or Vespa. Now you think about what you and your neighbors bought most recently. Someone would say, people now buy Creta, people now buy Scorpio. Someone had mentioned Punch. People now buy Brezza. This is the entire journey. Yes, MG Hector. So people used to buy 800s, Splendors, Chetaks at that point of time, to now people majorly upgrading into SUV category vehicles, right? So from an 800 to an SUV, multiplied across crores of households. In this slide, if you will see, you'll see this in all the text. So rising per capita income, right? Income has gone up of people. Credit has become cheaper compared to 10 years or 15 years from where we stand right now. The quality of roads have improved, right? And frankly, fashion. इंडिया में क्या है, इसके पैसे तो मेरे पास क्यों नहीं है ना? मेरे नेबर के पास ये है तो मेरे पास कम से कम उतना तो होना चाहिए. यस, करेक्ट, शो ऑफ. India has basically fell in love with ground clearance and a commanding and a dominating seat position, which an SUV gives you, right? आपको बहुत रील्स दिखेंगे, थार, स्कॉर्पियो वाले किसी को नहीं छोड़ते, राइट? The sedan in India has basically, did not die of competition. It died because of fashion, correct? We are a nation basically that has decided we must sit high while, still stuck in traffic. ताकि आगे कितनी गाड़ियां खड़ी हैं हमको अच्छे से दिखे. Now watch what this makeshift has, done to the league table. Uh, because volume share and profit share are two different games. If you see Maruti, the undisputed king of the small car era, has seen its passenger vehicle share come down from 51% to around 40% right now. Because its historic strength sat at a value end of the market. आता था ना ऐड कितना देती है, वो वैल्यू बायर्स आस्क क्वेश्चंस आस्क करते, राइट? और आप सेकेंड एंड पे अगर आप महिंद्रा को देखोगे, उसका पोर्टफोलियो कैसा है? इट इज प्योर एसयूवी पोर्टफोलियो. It has climbed from 6.5% passenger vehicle market share in first quarter of FY22 to 15% market share in FY26. If you see Tata, if you see Toyota, if you see Kia, they have all grown their market share because of the SUV-led ranges which they have introduced in the market. एक टाइम पे होंडा होता था, once a sedan powerhouse, is now below 1% market share. Why? Because the entire sedan segment is a dying segment. No one wants to buy a sedan. Now, nobody on this list, became a worse engineer overnight. Sub auto manufacturers have the best of the best technologies, but if you see the profit pool moved, okay, the kya move kiya? Profit pool. And the portfolios either moved with it or did not move, or were against it, right? You have to realign in terms of the trend which is being played in the market. अगर एसयूवी का ट्रेंड बढ़ रहा है और आप अपने पोर्टफोलियो में अगर एसयूवी कम करते जा रहे हो, तो यू आर गोइंग अगेंस्ट द मार्केट डायरेक्शन, राइट? विच मीन्स यू विल मूव योर, which means you will lose your market share. Now, what Mahindra did very intelligently, they said we'll not come in sedan, we'll not come in the small car segment because it's a dying segment. We'll only remain in the SUV category. Hence, over last 5-6 years, if you see their market share, if you see Tata Motors market share, if you see Kia, if you see, these companies' market share where SUV portfolio is at a dominating position, their market share has also grown up proportionally. So, again, if you can write down, if you can make a note, in auto, the mix decides the money. In auto, the mix decides the money. Track where the volume is, not just how much volume there is. Okay, it's a deep statement. Track where the volume is, not just how much volume there is. समझ आया ना? Now coming to the two-wheelers category. Now, nearly 2.2 crore two-wheelers were sold in FY26, India's largest segment by units. And one of my favorite slides, which the SSI team has prepared to teach, because it is really a slide about social mobility. Now read the ladder from the bottom. Don't start from top. Bottom se chalu karo. The 100 to 110cc is the entry motorcycle, which is the Hero Honda HF Deluxe, the Splendor, all are being sold majorly in the rural market, are affordability driven, ferociously price elastic. This is often the, motorized asset a household ever owns. इसके ऊपर एक स्टेप अगर जाएंगे, one step above this is 110 to 125cc bike. The first upgrade a rising income buys, right? Then 125 plus cc premium commuters अगर आप देखोगे, Pulsars and the Apaches of the world kick in. Now these are aspirational products on two-wheelers. Alongside, if you see the scooters, urban, gearless, family shared, and at the top क्या दिख रहा है आपको? Electric two-wheelers. TVS iQube, Bajaj Chetak, Ola, Ather, Hero Vida, still in transition, and we will again discuss more about this separately in the future slides. So here is an analyst's translation, right? As an analyst, आपको क्या देखना है इसमें? This ladder is a real-time census of Indian economy, India's income mobility. क्या? This ladder is a real-time census of India's income mobility. When entry bike sales revive, what does it mean? जो अभी हो रहा था immediately after the GST reduction. Rural India is healing. If you check the FADA retail numbers from September onwards till now, you will see a rural-urban split. And you will see two-wheelers mein rural was running much faster than the urban market. It was happening exactly because of this, because of the entry-level two-wheeler market again ramping up. When the 125cc plus premium end outgrows the entry end, which is exactly what this decade has delivered, which is the middle class is climbing, right? Your per capita income is increasing, the middle class is becoming richer, so that upgrade. The two-wheeler market is basically not, again, it is not one market. It is an escalator. Okay. And each floor sells a different story. So as I said earlier, auto is not one industry. अगर कोई बोलता है auto is doing good, then you need not even speak to that analyst. If you drill deep, Again, the two-wheeler market is not one market. It is an escalator, and each floor is selling a different story altogether. Okay. So again, a question to you, you can answer in the chat box. Uh, why do scooters keep gaining share in the urban India? What is one reason according to you for this gain? If the scooter sales are rising, Honda Activa is rising, TVS iQube is rising, क्यों हो रहा है वो? Women folk driving, high convenience, easy to use, unisex appeal, long distance. Yes, the first reason is because it is a gearless convenience, no gears. So which means anyone can ride it. Family uses it across members, correct? Right? Someone said women. Yes, women riders have started adopting two-wheelers. सिर्फ motorbikes पे women adopter नहीं रहते हैं because of the scooters which are gearless scooters. Again, short hop हो या storage space हो, all for all these reasons, the scooter sales have gone up. The scooters, uh, basically the scooter sales rise tracks what urbanization, and importantly more women joining the workforce, not only for home purpose, because more women in the urban areas work, in offices, and are riding, so they use scooters. So therefore the demography visible is in this sales table. Now if you see a competitive note, which you can keep an eye on, the top four कौन है इसमें? हीरो, होंडा, टीवीएस, बजाज. They control over 80% of the total market. And then you notice comes Royal Enfield. चुपचाप शांति से बैठा है, just at 4 to 5% of the volume share, right? Now, in going forward in the forward slides, we'll see how Royal Enfield will teach us the most elegant lesson in this industry about the difference between market share and profit share. As I said earlier, both are two different things, right? हमने नोट भी किया था. Now, moving ahead, if you see slide number 12, which is operating leverage, why timing matters. Uh, the most important piece of arithmetic in this session. Why do auto stocks swing so wildly through a cycle? Now, this happens because of the operating leverage. And let me build it with simple numbers. Only mental maths is required for this. So, a vehicle plant basically is a huge mountain of fixed cost, right? The factory, the robots, the salaries, the R&D which happens, those bills arrive whether you produce 1 lakh vehicle or 2 lakh vehicle or 10 lakh vehicle, it will continue to remain the same. So imagine an OEM selling 100 vehicles, and each sells say at 100 rupees, variable cost are the steel, part, labor, that scale, at that scale. It's say that is say at 70. So contribution is 30 per vehicle, right? OEM selling 100 vehicles and MRP of each is 100 rupees. And the variable cost is 70, right? So the contribution per vehicle is 30, right? Or 3,000 in total because they are making 100 vehicles. Now fixed cost is what? For 100 vehicles, 2,000 rupees. And profit kitna raha? 1,000 rupees. Now volume grows just at how much percent? If it grows at say 10%, say from 100 vehicles to 110 vehicles, the contribution becomes 3,300. Now fixed cost say stays fixed, right? It is still 2,000 rupees. Hence your profit increases to 1,300 rupees, right? 10% more than the volume. So 30% more profit at that starting margin. And directionally, for a typical passenger vehicle OEM, say at 65 to 75% capacity utilization, EBITDA moves roughly twice as fast as volume. Now the frightening part इसमें क्या है? The same math also runs downhill. A 10% volume decline does not dent profit, but it actually crushes the profit. Now that 11-year chart with CV down 53%. Now imagine what that did to the CV makers. उस समय Tata Motors and Ashok Leyland, which are the listed companies, उनकी क्या हालत हुई होगी? Several barely actually broke even because a CV plant typically needs 60% plus utilization just to break even. So basically two practical riders come in. First is the raw material. When steel spikes, OEM margins dip for a quarter or two and then recover, because 70 to 80% of the commodity move, gets passed through to price with 1 to 2 quarter of lag. So a single weak quarter, on steel spike is usually a timing artifact, not a broken thesis. Second, and maybe write this down also, it is important for you to understand. Uh, Margins are a consequence of the cycle. Margins are a consequence of the cycle, not a property of the company. Position ahead of the cycle. Never fall in love with a company at its peak margin. Position ahead of the cycle and never fall in love with a company at peak margin. Because peak margin plus peak volume, is usually the top of the mountain. Okay? पीक भी मार्जिन भी सबसे बेस्ट है, वॉल्यूम भी सबसे अच्छा है, तो इसके ऊपर और क्या होगा? इसके ऊपर तो और कुछ है नहीं, which means you are standing at top of the mountain. And the crowd discovers auto stocks precisely at this point of time. जब बड़े बड़े कैंडल्स बनने लगते हैं डेली चार्ट पे, वीकली चार्ट पे, मंथली चार्ट पे, पीपल सेज चलो खरीदना चालू करो. ऑल द टीवी एंकर्स गो बिहाइंड, this is the stock which is moving, right? But boss, that is the biggest trap. So the professionals basically buys the operating leverage before it turns. Okay. This is where your analysis skill will come into play. Okay. Could you please explain CV leverage, the second point? See, if you see, did you? I hope you understand the normal fixed cost, variable cost thing. I will not discuss that because it was very basic. You know, uh, so okay. Let me again very briefly tell you, very quickly tell you. Let's say OEM is selling 100 vehicles, and each vehicle is sold at 100 rupees. Okay, variable cost is 70, so contribution is 30, right? और अगर 100 vehicles के लिए देखेंगे, it will become what, 3000. So total fixed cost in this case will be 2000 rupees and profit will be 1000. Now assume that the volume is growing at 10%, which means 100 का 110 हो गया. Contribution again then becomes what, 3300. Fixed cost will remain fixed, right? 2000 पहले था, 2000 अभी भी रहेगा, 2000 जन्मों तक रहेगा, if the same things are other constraints are status paribus. But इस केस में profit will become 1300, right? 10% more volume is 30% more profit than the starting margin. Okay. And directionally, for a typical PV passenger vehicle OEM at 65 to 70% capacity utilization, EBITDA here moves roughly twice as fast as the volume. And as I said, if it goes north, everything is gung ho, right? If it goes south, using the same math, 10% volume decline does not dent profit. It basically, it destroys everything for the OEM, right? So remember the 11 years chart of CV when I said it was down 53%. I hope you remember, right? Imagine what it did to the CV makers during that period. Earnings, उनके earnings को क्या हुआ उस समय? Just imagine. Several barely would have broken even, right? Because CV plant, is typically it needs 60 to 60% plus kind of utilization just to break even. Now, again, as I said, two riders. One is the raw material, where the steel's prices would have spiked. So, OEM margins dip for a quarter or two and then basically recover because 70 to 80% of the commodity move, gets passed through to price with a 1 to 2 quarter of lag. So, a simple, single week quarter on a steel spike is usually a timing artifact, right? And it is not basically a broken thesis. I hope you understood this now. ये basics है boss. I'm just giving you the nuances of the trade. As I said, important point to note here is peak margin plus peak volume is usually top of the mountain, which needs to be kept in mind. This is what gets covered as breaking news in all the business channels. So keep away from all the business channels, when you're doing your analysis. I had thought of taking a break, but we are running a bit against time. So it's already 3:40 and 2 to 4 was the session. But I'll quick without taking a break, we'll move ahead. Okay. The next part is business models, the KPIs, and the unit economics. If you see slide 13, this is the analytical core of this session. One sentence sets up everything you are about to see here, basically, in this industry. Profitability is driven by mix and pricing power. And remember, the Royal Enfield example will come here. It was sitting quietly at 3-4%, right? When we discussed last 2 slides back. Profitability is basically driven by mix and pricing power and not by volume growth alone. So I'm going to prove that sentence into you in the next, say, 15-20 minutes. Once for every vehicle maker, one for the dealer, and one for the component maker. Three business models and three completely different report cards. Okay. Quickly moving to slide 14, OEM economics. We had discussed about premiumization. Earlier, premiumization is one number. So if you see the OEM's report card, you will remember one metric of vehicle manufacturers, which is EBITDA per vehicle. This is one matrix you'll have to keep a track of. EBITDA per vehicle, which is total operating profit divided by total number of vehicles sold. It basically compresses what? It compresses volume, pricing, mix, and cost control into one number, right? Now, If you see the illustration on the slide, and note, these are basically teaching numbers and not any company's actual numbers. So in base case, an OEM sells, again, what we had explained earlier, I had explained earlier. Again, if you see, an OEM sells, say, 20 lakh vehicles, earns 1 lakh 40,000 crore of revenue at a 12% EBITDA margin, which is, it becomes 16,800 crore rupees. Uh, if you divide the volume 84,000 by EBITDA per vehicle, now the magic number, magic case it comes in. The OEM sells the same 20 lakh vehicle, right? Not one car more, but the mix shifts richer. Now he's selling more SUVs, more CNG variants, more top end variants. So the average selling price rises by 8%. है ना? Revenue becomes 1 lakh 51,200 crore. Margin nudges to about 12.8%, and EBITDA is at 19,400 crore. And EBITDA per vehicle in this case jumps to 97,000 rupees, which is what? 15% more profit per vehicle on zero volume growth, right? तो इसमें क्या हुआ? क्या मूव किया इसमें और क्या मूव नहीं किया? It basically the mix moved, right? The money moved, therefore. नंबर ऑफ व्हीकल्स वो उतना ही बना रहा है, बट उसने वेराइटी ऑफ व्हीकल फ्रॉम प्लेन वेनिला व्हीकल्स इट हैज अपग्रेडेड सेल्फ टू हायर कैटेगरी व्हीकल्स, राइट? एंड विद द सेम नंबर ऑफ व्हीकल्स गेटिंग मैन्युफैक्चर्ड, उसका एबिटा में कैसा इम्पैक्ट आया, राइट? ओनली बिकॉज द प्राइसिंग ऑफ दोज व्हीकल्स चेंज्ड with the same number of vehicles getting made. So, a quick question, है ना? Two OEMs say grow, both are growing, both grow at volumes of 5%. Company A, EBITDA per vehicle is, say, rising, and company B is falling while its discounts are widening. Now, which is a healthier company, company A or company B? Great. Deepak, you're wrong. It's not company B, it's company A. So, A is healthier than B. Why? B is buying market share with margin. उसको मार्केट शेयर का भूख है, और अपना मार्जिन सरेंडर कर रहा है वो मार्केट में, विच इज पुशिंग द मेटल थ्रू डिस्काउंट. Pushing the metal is a very auto term. Basically, you are selling your vehicles at discount. Connected back. This is why EBITDA per margin, EBITDA per vehicle will always beat volume growth as a health check. And why? Because slide, if you see, we've seen a red flag where EBITDA per vehicle falls despite volume growth. Correct? So one modeling commandant before we move ahead, when you compute realized prices, always use realized average selling price, okay, which is segment revenue divided by volume from the company's own disclosures. Never take a ex-showroom sticker price from a website, okay, because the sticker price includes GST, it also includes dealer's margin, and OEM never sees that money, right? So the model the OEM on what the OEM actually realizes, and the full OEM dashboard for your note reads wholesale versus retail, product mix, realized average selling price, discount levers, capacity utilization, EBITDA per vehicle, dealer inventory days, and the quality of market share. Share won by product versus share bought by discounts. These things have to be kept in mind. Coming quickly to the dealer economics. Now, this is where I operate. And let me be honest, the part of the value chain that analysts basically understand the least, because there are hardly any dealers which are listed. There are three dealers in total which are listed in the country: Popular Vehicles, Landmark, and Competent Vehicles. So if you see the dealership world, so dealership world is basically a very glamorous world. A lot of glasses, a lot of lights, a lot of test drives, a lot of staff. Is uh, this is a machine of fixed costs. So in our illustration, if you see, it is 10 crore a year, right? Let's say they take this example. Fixed cost is in 10 crore per year. The new car, it sells, earns a dealer a wafer thin margin in the range of, as I said, 2 to 5% EBITDA. And after interest on inventory funding, often just half to 1 or 0.5% net. That is the saving which a dealer has. Again, remember, the dealer has bought that inventory from the OEM with a borrowed money, right? And every day a car sits unsold, the interest meter keeps on running, because उसका मीटर तो चालू हो गया जिस दिन उसने इन्वेंट्री फंडिंग ली थी बैंक से. So his rotation has to be the quickest, so that he makes maximum amount, in his business. So selling new metal by itself barely pays for the lights. And if a dealer has only a showroom, then you can assume confidently that that dealer is always in loss. वो सिर्फ maybe for some other purpose he is using that dealership. But if a dealership does not have service uh, along with the showroom, that dealership will never make money. So where does the dealership actually live then? Is a question I think it will come in your mind. And as I said, it will live in the workshop behind the showroom. Workshop where service happens and spare parts. And in every wrapped around corner, which is the financing commissions, insurance commission, accessories, and the exchange of old vehicles. So on this slide, if you see, service and parts gross profit of 8 crore covers 80% of the 10 crore overhead before a single new car is sold. Now that ratio has a name. And what is it called? It is called service absorption ratio, which means आपका सर्विस कितना वैल्यू ऐड कर रहा है, कितना आपको रेवेन्यू दे रहा है, so that your entire costs are getting covered. Okay. And service plus parts gross profit divided by dealership overhead, fixed overhead. So yeah, dealers take loan for all the vehicle funding. So the service absorption ratio is service plus parts gross profit divided by dealership fixed overheads. And it is the single most important dealer health metric in existence. Ideally, if this number is 100%, or say 1, which means even if a dealer is not selling a single vehicle, still he is not in losses, right? Because uska ratio is 1. If this ratio is 80%, it means 80% of the costs are getting covered by the service revenue and the sale and the spares revenue. So here is why it matters, it should matter to all of you. The service annuity does not care about its monthly sales, it services the park. Park क्या है? Portfolio at risk. The entire population of vehicles which are already on road uh, will only grow over the years, right? So when a downturn strikes and new vehicles, volume falls, say 15%, the 80% absorption ratio barely will, even change its direction, because the workshop keeps churning in more and more revenue because of the service it is doing. So only 2 crore of overhead rides on the new car sales, and 40%. So if a dealer has a 40% absorption ratio, what does it mean? he is dependent on new car margin to pay the bills, and it will bleed within months and then wrap up its and shut down its shop. So same brand, same city, opposite fates. And knowing this, uh, you will now understand something, very subtle. When you see year-end discount wars, ask who is funding the discount. Is the OEM funding the discount through schemes, or the dealer is funding the discount through his margin? The health, therefore, of a brand's dealer network is again a leading indicator of the brand's own health. Okay. A starved network eventually basically shows up at the lost market share in such cases. So, next time, if your service advisor calls you for the fourth time, maybe about your car service, sir, this is a service reminder call. So don't get irritated because you are not a customer. You are an annuity for him. You know? Somewhere a CFO is always loving you coming back to his workshop and service stations. So uh, you can write down a statement. Uh, the dealership earns around the year. The dealership earns around the car. The dealership earns around the car, not on it, but by service absorption ratio. Service absorption ratio is the dealer's survival matrix. The dealership earns around the car and not on it. Service absorption ratio is the dealer's survival metric and not the car park. Sorry, and the car park is the annuity. Service absorption ratio is the dealer's survival metric, and the car park, PARC, park, is the annuity. Okay, now coming to the auto ancillary economics and content per vehicle. How does the ancillary world work? So we have done OEM business, we have done the dealership model, OEM model, dealership model, and this is the third business model, the ancillary, who are the component makers. And it comes with its own, obviously, magic matrix, which is called CPV, which is content per vehicle. Rupee value of the supplier's components that goes into one vehicle, right? Now you can think of CPV as the ancillaries average selling price, which is the ASP. And it unlocks the most counterintuitive fact in this sector. Components company can grow rapidly even when its customer, the vehicle manufacturer, the auto OEM, sells a completely flat numbers in the vehicles. Okay. So if you see the example, a wiring harness maker basically supplies say 12,000 rupees worth of content 12,000 rupees of content on a petrol car. The OEM sells say 5 lakh cars, and the supplier's revenue in this case is 600 crore. Now the same platform now is going electric, and EV carries far more wiring, power electronics, and high voltage cabling, right? And therefore, the content jumps 40% to about 16,800. The OEM still sells the same 5 lakh cars, you know, uh, and supplier revenue, therefore, in this case, it becomes 840 crore. So 40% revenue growth for the supplier, zero growth for the car maker. The supplier has basically what he has done what? He has decoupled from its customer's volume cycle, right? That is the entire bull case for the best Indian ancillaries, in one arithmetic. Now, if you see the same math runs in reverse also, and you must always check the revenue gear the company is sitting on. A fuel injection supplier, say, earns 8,000 rupees on a petrol car. On the electric version of that car, its content will become from 8,000 rupees to zero, right? Because there is no fuel to inject in an electric vehicle. So before you price any ancillaries EV story, map whether its content per vehicle rises or falls in the transition. Okay. Now that single question basically will separate the winners from the, you know, walking woundeds. I hope you are getting all the CPV portion, right? Content per vehicle, which is a metric to understand the auto ancillary business. Now, beyond CPV, the ancillary dashboard, beyond the CPV, the ancillary dashboard, if for your notes, if you see the revenue mix between OEM supply, aftermarket, and exports, customer concentration. One OEM above 30% of revenue is basically a risk flag. For an ancillary company, any client which is having more than 30% of revenue is a red flag. Okay. Second is platform stickiness. Once designed onto a vehicle platform, a supplier typically stays for that platform's life of at least 6 to 8 years, which is again an annuity like of a revenue. And third is commodity pass through ability, then working capital intensity and technology content. So, and ancillaries as a class often therefore outgrows the OEMs because of content growth and exports. And the best of them earn OEM beating margins with far lighter capex. Okay. डबल इंजन की सरकार. Mahindra and Mahindra Auto, Mahindra and Mahindra Tractors. Now, now let us assemble, everything, what we have learned till now. Almost 2 hours has gone by. क्या क्या सीखा हमने अभी तक? Just let me take a water break for 5 seconds. So what all have we learned? We have learned mix. We have learned pricing power. We have learned segments, cycles, you know, into one living company. Now, the question on the slide is the question every PV analyst in India has had to answer these past 3 years. Now, why does Mahindra and Mahindra earn the best margins amongst India's passenger vehicle makers? The lazy answer is, सर कॉस्ट कंट्रोल करते होंगे, बेस्ट कॉस्ट कंट्रोलिंग होगा, तो मार्जिन अच्छा है, प्रोटेक्टेड है. बट द रियल आंसर इज इट्स आर्किटेक्चर. Mahindra runs two structurally high margin engines, put together. Engine one क्या है? Engine one is the SUV premiumization. And as we had discussed earlier, Mahindra builds only where the profit pool moved. Scorpio N, XUV 700, Thar, no hatchback, no sedan to dilute the mix, right? The entire portfolio sits in the richest body style in the market. It is the number one SUV player by revenue share at about how much? What, 25%. And its PV share, as you saw, went from 6.5% to 15% over last 4 years, right? This is engine number one. Engine number two क्या है? The farm equipment. M&M, as you know, is the world's largest tractor maker by volume, with a commanding 43, 44, or 43.6 exactly percent domestic share across both Mahindra and Swaraj brands put together. You know, and this is the highest ever, and it's 43rd consecutive year of tractor market leadership. No one has beaten Mahindra in 43 years is absolutely abnormal. You know, 43 years, friends, and tractors are a structurally high margin business that dances to the rural cycle, right? Rural cycle क्या है? Monsoon, crop income. These are the two rural cycles, right? Which moves differently from the urban SUV cycle, right? हमने डिस्कस किया था, if you remember in the previous slides. Now, the numbers on the slide, if we come to that, FY26 standalone basis, the farm equipment division earns a PBIT margin just under, say, 20%, 19.8, while the auto division earns 9.3%. The farm engine runs at roughly twice, if you see, the auto engine's margin. Now, if you do a blending of high margin counter, which is cyclical engine, uh, with a fast growing SUV engine, the consolidated margin is both lifted and stabilized, both happening at the same time. When the urban cycle, say, catches cold, the tractor cushions it. And when the monsoons disappoint, the SUVs carry the entire load. You know, that is margin by design and not margin by cost cutting. And a maker of how well this house is run, even its born electric SUV business, the Inglo platform BEVs, BEV is born electric vehicles, has turned PBIT positive in FY26 in its very first year of full scale into the business. Now, hold Mahindra and Mahindra in your head, and in part five, we'll again return to M&M in the case study format with the valuation question. What should you pay for a dual engine first? So first we must clear the two forces that reshape everyone, of these business models from outside: the regulator, the electron, and once that is done, then we'll come back to the both the models. So quickly coming to part four, which is regulation and structural shifts. Now, ये क्या है? This is the government coming into play and throwing a curveball every now and then, right? So in most industries, if you see, regulation is a compliance department. In auto, regulation is basically a PNL line, profit and loss line. A single notification can raise every vehicle's cost. It can maybe kill one segment and also give birth to another new segment altogether. Sometimes all three in the same year also may happen. So the analyst skill is not to memorize the rules, but it is to sort them out. Okay. So every rule does one of the three things. And this next slide is that sorting machine for all of you. So again, I like giving different buckets. So three buckets in this government rule slide also. You have to classify before you react. Okay. So bucket one, rules which are raising cost. The BS4 emission regime comes into this bucket. BS4 to BS6 jump, which happened in 2020. We leapfrog from BS4 to BS6 directly without BS5 coming into between. Okay. So India leaps to world-class emission norms, made every ICE vehicle, ICE vehicle. What does ICE mean? Anyone of you can tell ICE का मतलब क्या है? You have EV vehicle and you have ICE vehicle. EV is electric vehicle, right? ICE is yes, internal combustion engine, correct. So every ICE vehicles uh, co- is costlier to build, right? Now its second stage in April 23 again added more. Cafe fuel efficiency standards basically fines OEMs whose fleet average misses the target of the total carbon emission from the vehicles, And note the design. The penalty is slab based and flat per vehicle. So for a high volume car maker, even a marginal miss multiplies into a very large number, okay, in CAFE norms. Now, third is safety mandates, airbags, crash norms, again in the same direction. Now, if you see bucket number two, where rules that shift demand, when compliance costs push up entry level prices, the bottom of the pyramid postpones or drops out, right? While those who can afford to basically climb up. So regulation itself became one of the quiet engines of premiumization, and of that, lost basically two-wheeler a decade. Bucket three is rules that create opportunity. The PLI production incentives for advanced auto technology and cells, the PM e-drive electric vehicle incentive scheme, the scrappage policy generating replacement demand, the export competitiveness push, the state EV policies which are coming in. All these fall in bucket three. So, one thing is mentioned here, and it's an old number. GST rates earlier was 28% GST plus around 20% cess, right? Which made vehicles as costly, GST on vehicles as high as, say, 48, 49%. But now, post 21st September, the new GST rates on cars are 18% and 28%, right? So, just uh, this slide, I think, left was not updated properly, but just keep that in mind. So look at the bottom panel. GST, I've already mentioned. This is where that change is coming in. So, so what happened? I already explained post 22nd September. The first day of Navratri, when the new GST rates kicked in. And I can tell you from the FADA side, showrooms across India delivered like a festival without a festival. Maruti alone clocked close to 30,000 deliveries, its best single day delivery in 3.5 decades. And that is what a tax bracket shift looks like on the ground. The wedge in favor of EVs continue to remain 13 points versus the small car, because GST on EV is 5% and it continues to remain at 5%. But earlier, GST on small cars were at 38%, 32%, which is now reduced to 18%, right? So that gap has come down, but that gap still remains. But because and 35% gap versus an SUV when you compare the EV products, you know. So both the affordability door for ICE has been reopened now because ICE vehicle GSTs have come down. So again, it has come into that affordability window, and therefore we are seeing a continuous 9 months of great bull run in the auto industry, especially in the cars segment. So what happens and how it is impacting when, if you see, when policy moves, mix is moving, and when mix is moving, margins are moving, right? We've already seen this example earlier. Now, this chain is the whole of part four in one line. Okay. So you can write down this thing. what you need to do as an analyst is sort every regulation, whether it raises cost, whether it shifts demand, or whether it creates opportunity. GST 2.0, small cars and two-wheelers less than 350 cc at 18%, large cars and SUVs flat 40% with cess now gone, and EVs still at 5%. So do an analysis of pre GST 2.0 and post GST 2.0. What were the GST rates for all the vehicles? You will get a clear understanding of where the rates continue to remain the same and where the rates have gone down. Now, quickly coming to the EV transition, we've already understood, how to track data, and to track the EV numbers, a single all India number you can find on the Vahan registration basis. Vahan is our default ruler for EV penetration also. You can find all the electric vehicle registrations here on a real-time basis. And overall penetration, if you see in FY26, was a little over 8%. But if you see the numbers, what we released for the month of June, we have touched 11% total EV penetration till now. So the electric three-wheeler, is already the default market leader in this case. This is as per the CMVR rules. L5 passenger subsegment is what it is called. Roughly every second new registration is electric. Two-wheelers, if you see, around 6.5% and is still climbing. It is now at 10+% as we speak. Passenger cars, mid-single digit, the fastest growing, yes, up more than 8% in FY26, but still early. One transition, three entirely different speeds. Again, if you see, everything is getting electrified. But see the segments, there's a segment leader, someone is the segment second best, someone is, at a lower pace. So every category is getting electrified at a different pace right now. So the question comes is, why does rickshaw electrify first than a family car? Family car is getting electrified last, and a rickshaw, a three-wheeler is getting electrified first. The answer is very simple. It is utilization. The three-wheeler basically runs 100+ kilometer every day, right? For a commercial operator, for him, the fuel savings pays back the battery premium within a couple of years. And the arithmetic forces the switch, right? A family car does 25, 30 kilometers on a per day basis, and basically sleeps as the basement of the parking lot. Its payback hence stretches for years. So the buyer basically hesitates that in how much time will he be able to recover the price of the vehicle. Now hold that logic. The next slide, turns it into a formula you can reuse for any vehicle category anywhere in the world. We'll discuss that. On the subsidy timeline at the bottom, if you see, know the sequences like a story, fame to big demand subsidy. It ran from 2019 to March 24. Then the 6-month bridge, which came in between, was the EMPS scheme. It carried from 24, and from 24 onwards, PM E-Drive scheme is currently running. So roughly 11,000 crore, covering two-wheelers, three-wheelers, e-bus, e-trucks, even e-ambulances, plus the charging infrastructure getting developed under the PM E-Drive scheme. But the underline, the slide's last line, subsidies are the supporting actor. The structural driver is still the TCO parity, which is total cost of ownership. A three-wheeler electrified first, regardless of which scheme was running. When the economics work, it accelerates policy, and it accelerates the policy. It does not create it, right? It is basically the demand and supply cycle and the kind of run I will do with my vehicle. Now coming to slide 21, the ICE and BEV economics and the supply chain split. If you see, uh, here is that arithmetic, which has been laid bare, uh, directional teaching numbers. So always state assumptions before quoting them. I've been telling this earlier also. An ICE powertrain, which is engine plus transmission, it costs 1 to 1 and 1.5 lakh rupees, right? A BEV battery plus motor package costs 2.5 lakh to 4 lakh rupees. The electric vehicle, carries its penalty upfront because the costs are high. Battery prices are high at this point of time, right? It may come down or it may be at par with the ICE vehicles with the falling trend in the battery prices. But if you see per kilometer, the petrol costs 5 to 6 rupees, while electricity costs about a rupee and a quarter. The running cost falls roughly three quarters. So the break even is very simple. How many kilometers do you drive is always a question, right? And therefore, you decide whether you should buy an ICE vehicle or an EV vehicle. So, at typical private usage, 4 to 5 years, and for 100 kilometer a day operator, barely 2 years. That is the break even cost. So, the highest kilometer buyer breaks even first. Quite logical, right? And that one sentence explains the entire penetration chart you just saw in the previous slide and predicts the next wave too, which is three-wheelers, fleets, taxis, delivery vans. All these will get electrified in this sequence. And last will be the private vehicle, right? So battery replacement cost is still under price discovery, Alkesh, right now because it is a new segment altogether, all put as of now. Industry is still trying to find out, how to price the battery replacement cost because the battery usage is like a mobile phone usage. What is the kind of runs of charge it has done till now? What is the health of the battery? This is an entirely different gamut of analyzing the battery cost. So, as I said, highest kilometer buyer, breaks even first, and that one sentence will explain the entire penetration chart, which we have seen earlier. So, if I ask you a very quick question, a fuel injection supplier say earns 8,000 rupees per ICE car. On the BEV version, its content is worth how much? If you can tell me. Correct. We're just testing all the knowledge imparted in the previous slides. And that is why, the bottom of the slide is the auto ancillaries investors map for the decade. Winners where the content rises, which is wiring harnesses up 30 to 50% per vehicle, power electronics and the EV powertrain itself, motors, battery management, drive lines, where Indian names like Sona BMW plays a role. Tires are neutral to positive because EVs are heavier, much torqueier vehicles, and the wear and tear of the tires are faster. Who are the losers? Obsolescence risk, basically the fuel injection, exhaust systems, because they have zero content on a BEV vehicle. And a large neutral middle, will be the brakes, chassis, castings and forgings, where motor housings basically simply replace engine blocks. So a transition basically redistributes the entire ancillary pool. It does not basically shrinks it, it redistributes it. And your job as analyst is to stand, where the pool is flowing to, which is, the exactly the test we will run on a real company, Sona BLW, in next 10 odd minutes. Okay. So vehicle display systems will be neutral because the same displays come in both ICE vehicle as well as EV vehicles. That doesn't impact too much. Now coming to the fifth part of our session, valuation framework and case study. So this is the final part of our auto and auto ancillary sector analysis. The session was divided in 5 parts, and this is where it all boils down to. The final part and the destination for everything so far. What should you pay for these businesses? The one line philosophy of auto valuation, matching the multiple to character of the earnings, cyclical earnings, structural earnings, annuity earnings, and story earnings, do not deserve the same rulers. You have to use different rulers for each and every of these things. Two case studies will make this concrete for you. One is an OEM case study, which is Mahindra and Mahindra, and one is the ancillary, which is Sona BLW for you. So, which are the matrix which we'll use to value auto? This is what this slide 23 talks about. Okay, so if I ask you, uh, which multiple fits a premium two-wheeler brand like Royal Enfield? So the previous Royal Enfield question, which I said we'll cover later, we are reaching to that point now. So the question is, which multiple fits a premium two-wheeler brand like Royal Enfield? Is it EV EBITDA or PE multiple or price to book or EV to sales? Okay, so now look at the table from left to right. A steady mass market passenger vehicle, value it on EV to EBITDA, which looks through depreciation gains and capital structure, right? A diversified OEM with multiple engines, EV to EBITDA, but segment aware, value each engine on its own character. You will see this with M&M in a moment. A CV maker will be EV to EBITDA, but disciplined by where you are in the cycle, with price to book as the anchor, because the true earnings, understate a cyclical and peak earnings flatter, and peak earnings will flatter it. A tier one ancillary will be EV to EBITDA plus order book to sales. An EV pure play earnings multiple where they exist plus the order book. And the premium two-wheeler brand. The answer, yes, you are all correct. It is, PE. So why PE for Royal Enfield? Now look at the margin ladder on the right of the slide. Royal Enfield holds barely 4 to 5% of the two-wheeler volumes, right? We had seen this earlier also. Yet commands the richest margin in the segment by a distance. It is not selling transport. It is selling identity. It's a cult brand, a consumer brand that happens to have wheels. You know, brand earnings are high quality, repeatable, price power earnings, pricing power earnings, so that market pays off for earnings quality on the PE, the way it does for consumer companies, not for a volume machine on a capacity multiple. So market share and profit share are different games, and hence Royal Enfield is a big proof of the same. Now connect the dots, what we discovered earlier. Why? Hero, TVS, HMSI, Bajaj were all volume players. When we said that Royal Enfield is a different beast altogether. Now, if you want proof that this whole segment aware logic is not just analyst theory, the market itself enforced it recently. In late 25, India's largest CV maker and its PV, the JLR business, formally split into two separated listed companies. Which was that company? Tata Motors, right? Tata Motors was listed as one company which had the CV business as well as the PV business, and they both split separately. Why? What was the reason? Because we have already learnt it. A truck cycle and a luxury car story could no longer share one multiple. Some of the parts stopped being a spreadsheet exercise and became a corporate action, right? Now, when the market agrees with your framework strongly enough to restructure a 100-year-old company around it, take the framework seriously. Now, before the case studies, the 5 classic valuation mistakes in this sector. The slide from part 5 of your pointers, the delivered as warnings. Valuing a cyclical at its peak, ignoring dealer inventory buildup, confusing wholesale growth with retail demand, ignoring product mix shift, and underestimating disruptions risk. Every one of these maps to something what we have learned today, right? Which is exactly why we have learned. Because these are the important cores and pillars of valuing and analyzing the auto industry and auto ancillary industry. Now, with all these, quickly we'll deep dive into the two case studies. One is Mahindra, and as I said, so second is the Sona BLW. Now, this is case study number 1. The OEM and no, OEM is what? Mahindra and Mahindra. Notice how we do case studies in this course. Not It is not a good company. That is a fan's question, right? The analyst will basically ask, what exactly is the engine? Is it durable? Or what am I being asked to pay for it? Right? This is the kind of questions which you will have to ask before analyzing the company. Now, first, if you see the facts, all FY26 from the company's results, and remember the discipline, divisional margins on standalone numbers. So overseas subsidiaries do not blur the picture to you, right? The automotive segment generated about 1.18 lakh crore of consolidated revenue. Number one in SUV with 25% revenue market share. Number one in tractors with 43.5% market share. 43rd straight year of leadership. Farm equipment PBIT margin just under 20% against the auto division's 9.3. The two times dual engine, the two times dual engine which we have seen earlier in the previous slide. A record profit year, dividend raised, and the Born EV Inglo platform, the BE6 and XEV9E turned PBIT positive in FY26, remarkably early for the EV program. Now the analyst's 3-step, and this is the template for any diversified OEM. So note it as a method, not a stock view. Step 1 is size each engine separately. Value the SUV business against the PV peers on its own growth and margin. Okay. Value the tractor business as what it is, a 4-decade franchisee, counter cyclical, structurally high margin. Then add some of the parts. One blended multiple on a 2-engine company always misprices one engine, right? So step 2 will be judge the durability of the engine. Strip out the tractor cushion and ask the uncomfortable questions. Can SUV margins hold on every rival crowds into the same body style? Is 25% revenue share defensible when the next wave of launches lands? Does the EV mix dilute or protect the unique economics as it scales? Okay. Step three is, refuse to pay for peak. I had made you write a note on this. FY26, had record SUV and a strong rural cycle, both engines firing at one place. Slide 12, the earlier slide also taught you that operating leverage does at the top of the cycle, right? So the closing question on the slide is the entire discipline in one line. Is the re-rating justified by the durability of the dual engine or by one perfect year? Durability basically deserves a multiple. A perfect year deserves a suspicion, right? So let me ask you, it's a stress test. What could break the dual engine thesis? Give me one risk you think in the chat box. See, 1 year you had both the engines firing, right? The agri engine also plus the SUV engine as well. It may not happen every year. So what could break the dual engine thesis is my question. वो क्या क्या रिस्क हैं जो इस डुअल इंजन को ब्रेक कर सकते हैं? GST rate. GST rate increases for EVs. Yes, may happen. You don't know. Rural consumption, high SUV competition, poor monsoon. Okay. So yes, SUV competition compressing margins can happen. 2 week monsoons hitting one by one can also happen. EV scale up diluting its margin may also hit. But one important is rare earth or battery supply shocks coming from China. No one talked about that. You know, capital allocation can also be a misstep. So every thesis needs a tripwire, which takes us to a company whose entire story is in the tripwire. Okay. So we are done with the M&M thing. We'll come to Sona BLW. Now, this is on the ancillary side, and everything from slide 16 comes alive here. Sona BLW or Sona Compstar, began life making precision forged gears in Gurugram. And today it supplies differential assemblies, precision gears, and crucially, the EV traction motors and driveline systems to vehicle makers across the world, not only in India, but it also supplies to companies like Tesla. Generally, it is a global tier one. Most of its revenue comes from outside India. And one of its market's favorite ways to play vehicle electrification. This, my friends, is the India's growth story in its most sophisticated manner. Not just assembling for India, but engineering for the entire world. The FY26 facts from its results, if you see the revenue at 4475 crore, up 26% in a year, where its customers' volumes grew a tenth of that. CPV decoupling is happening live on stage for you. EBITDA margins 24.7%, richer than nearly every OEM it supplies. Remember the value chain lesson, what we had done. The protected node, out-earns the assembler. A net order book of about 23,700 crore, 5.3 times of its annual revenue. with every programs making up roughly around 70% of that book. And the BEV programs already delivering 35% of the FY26 revenue. The market prices all this at premium PE that would make a traditional forging company, faint. So the analyst question is not, is Sona a good EV story? Everyone knows the story already. The question is, does the order book justify the multiple? So for a component manufacturer with multi-year programs, order book to sales is the lead indicator. What is the lead indicator? Order book to sales. Is it tomorrow's revenue? It, it basically it is tomorrow's revenue which is visible today, right? This is what this indicator captures. So the way an order book works for a defense company, which makes it both the anchor of this thesis and its tripwire. The anchor is 5.3 time revenue of contracted future business, and the tripwire is that book must keep converting into revenue at the implied pace and keep growing. Okay, I'll again repeat. The anchor is 5.3 times its revenue of contracted future business. And the tripwire is that book must keep converting into revenue at the implied pace and keep growing. The moment conversion slips or the books stalls, the premium multiple loses its foundation. And you will see this disclosures quarters before it appears in revenue. Okay. And order books are not fixed deposits. Basically, programs can be delayed, resourced, or cancelled. FY26 itself saw a high profile customer program getting called off. A live reminder that visibility is not certainty. So, two professional cautions before we close the case. First, read the fine print on what counts as EV. Sona always makes a product called as BSG, a belt starter generator, which is used in 48-volt mild hybrids. And that is an ICE adjacent product, not a battery EV product. So an analyst who jumps BSG, who lumps into BSG as the BEV story is overstating the thesis. And examiners and the markets, and then therefore they punish that. And second is customer concentration. So for any ancillary, ask what share the top customers hold. About 30% in one OEM without a multi-year agreement is a standing red flag. Global customers cut both ways. Bigger programs, but bigger single program risk also comes attached to it. Okay. I'll repeat it once again for you. Uh, First is read the fine print on what counts as EV. As I said, Sona also makes a bell starter generator, which is used in a 48-volt mild hybrids, which are being used majorly in India if you talk about by Maruti and Toyotas, because they have mild hybrid vehicles. Okay. This is an ICE adjacent product. Any component made by an ancillary company, if it is used in an ICE vehicle, see the usage of that product. If it is used in an ICE vehicle, please treat that component only as an ICE product, not as an EV product made for a BEV. And second, as I said, customer concentration, if anything is above 30%, it is a big red flag for that component manufacturer. So if I ask you a question, for this ancillary company tracking, you are allowed to track one disclosure from this company every quarter. Which one disclosure will you track and why? Quick answers. Everyone is still thinking. Okay, Lavang, Alkesh, Akshay, all correct answers. Yes, the answer is net order book. You know, it's growth and it's bev share plus conversion into revenue. This is what I will look at. If no one has said EBITDA margin, but even I'll accept EBITDA margin also if someone would have said that. Uh, but still, if I give a ranking, order book leads to margin. Order book leads and margins then follows it. So EBITDA, uh, net order book is the thing what I will look at for an ancillary company. Uh, that ways. So this is the second last slide, the auto analyst watch list. So we are into the last 5 minutes of the entire discussion now, and I want to leave you with a working tool, not just memories. Okay, on screen you will find 8 fields. You populate before any auto stock enters your active research. Now this is your entry gate. One is the segment tag. Which segment is it in? PV, two-wheeler, CV, tractor, three-wheeler, ancillary, EV, because the segment decides the analytical grammar. Two, where the segment sits in its volume cycle. State the basics. SIAM or FADA when you do, you know. Three, EV exposure क्या है? Percent of revenue to order book with the source cited. Four, raw material sensitivity क्या है? The primary input and its trend. Fifth, capacity utilization against the break-even threshold, the operating leverage dial, you know. Sixth, customer concentration for ancillaries. Seventh, your valuation entry band. Decide in advance in cold blood, not in a rising market, as we discussed earlier. Eight, thesis invalidation triggers क्या है? Write down on day one because the time to know your exit signal is before you enter it. Correct? And below below it, the red flags. Recite them like a pilot's checklist every time. EBITDA per vehicle falling while volumes are growing. Wholesale running ahead of retail with no production ramp up. Core segmentation share loss while management keeps, guiding recovery. An ancillary with more than 30% revenue in one customer. CV orders shrinking into freight softness. High promoter pledge in an ancillary. Any one of these is a yellow card. Okay. Two together, it becomes a World Cup soccer, a red card, and you are out of that soccer competition. Okay. So, uh, ideally, it's not a school and there's no classwork homework, but if you still want, you can do a quick homework if you think you can do it. Uh, and it is delightfully simple. Tonight pick up any one company, may it be an OEM, ancillary, or even a listed dealership. Fill all the 8 fields what we discussed just now. Uh, then when FADA's next monthly retail release comes out, test your thesis against the data. Or the last release came only 4 or 5 days back, so you can do with the last numbers also. So type the name of the company you are committing to right now in the chat so that I can also ask the SSCI team to see who all are those enthusiasts who can come to track auto. Ola. Mahindra, Samvardhan Motherson. Great. TMCV. Okay, okay. So just don't write it here. Also, try to map it with the slide and see where where all these companies are falling into which place, which categories. This is the last slide, the sector monitoring framework. Uh, so how do you stay current from today? You do not monitor auto by watching share prices. You watch the operating series, each one on the cadence at which it actually moves. If you see monthly FADA retail numbers, SIAM wholesale numbers, and the dealer inventory days with the SIAM versus FADA gap at these are your early warning sirens. If you move to quarterly, EBITDA margins, product mix, exports, where premiumization and pricing power show up in accounts, you know, annually, if you check capacity utilizations, new platforms, technology shift, where the next cycle is being decided. Uh, Monthly tells you the pulse, quarterly will tell you the health, and annual the destiny. All of it is free, as I said you earlier. All of it is public. You can, visit siam.in, fada.in, the Vahan dashboard and the company investor presentations, you know. So let me close the teaching with the sentence this entire session was built around. The closing line of your slide deck, if you read that very carefully, Indian auto is no longer just a manufacturing story. It is a mix shift, policy sensitive, technology disrupted, channel driven, capital cycle. 3 weeks from now, you may have, maybe you'll forget my voice, but carry these three rules and today never leaves you. One, name the basics. Wholesale is optimism and retail is the truth. Two, mix will beat volume. Watch where the growth is, not just how much. And three, call segments, never the sector. Each one runs on its own clock. And a final word from my side, not as your instructor today, but as someone who has spent a lot of time in the auto industry. India will motorize more in the next 20 years than it has in the last 70. More first vehicles will come in, more upgrades will happen, more electrification will happen, more exports to the world will also take place. Every era of that story will need analysts who can separate the signal from the noise. At 4:49 p.m. exactly, you are no longer a spectator of that story. You are a qualified reader of it. Read it monthly, read it honestly, and it will reward you for the entire career. Okay. So it's 4:50. Maybe I can take two or three questions now. We have already overshot by 50 minutes. And I don't have a habit of speaking so much like Sanjay Bhaiya. So, okay. So there are few questions coming in. So the question, how should the analyst interpret the discrepancies in Ola Electric's reported sales and service numbers? Is Ola just finding its footing, or does this signal a deeper structural issue with overall market transparency? Hmm. I will not give you an advice on Ola that way. So, but an excellent question, As analysts, our job is not to judge a company based on one event, but to understand what the data is telling us. Okay. Whenever you see discrepancies between reported sales, registrations, deliveries, or service numbers, the first step is not to jump to conclusion. Instead, ask maybe on to yeah, ask three questions. First, is it a timing issue? Is the auto industry dispatches, customer deliveries, registrations don't always happen on the same day or even in the same month. There's a time difference which is common. Second, you can ask is it a reporting issue? Different data sets measure different things, you know. Or third is it becoming a recurring pattern? So I've given you three things to look out for. And in Ola's case, it is a recurring pattern. So, and I've also given you red flags. So you are the best judge now. Uh, that was the question. We'll remember you forever for best auto teaching ever. Thank you so much. Thank you, Akshay. Sir, what in your view on E20 on its impact? No, E20 is now the most regular fuel. The only impact which it will have in the older 10 plus year vehicles where mileage may drop from 4 to 8%. But definitely there is no impact on engine. Okay, all that is myth. The Instagram university is baking a false narrative. It is good for the vehicle, it is good for the country, and it is good for each and everyone. There may be, yes, some drop in the older vehicles, but otherwise, it is a good fuel. There is no impact, there's no negative of that fuel, which generally the people are talking about. Uh, how to track customer sentiment analysis after sales product service issues. So you don't need to basically track after sales product issue as an analyst. The customer sentiment can easily tracked by the wholesale versus retail. If retail is happening at a greater pace than wholesale, then obviously the customer sentiment is extremely positive. Okay, so these were the questions. With this, thank you so much. Will the cafe norms lead to increase in EV penetration? Yes, it will lead because every company will have to manage its carbon emissions. And that's the reason why Mahindra was so aggressive in terms of bringing out its EV products. Because earlier it was only selling diesel products, right? And diesel had the biggest impact for Mahindra if it had to meet the cafe norms. To neutralize that, it has not gone hybrid, it has not gone CNG, it has directly gone the EV route so that the balancing act can happen much faster. And that is why Mahindra has been extremely aggressive in terms of bringing the EV products. Anmol, the question what you have asked is what I've taught today. So do go through the presentation and the recording once you receive it from SSCI and analyze on its own. Akshay, after your session, you have ignited my motivation to deep dive into this sector. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, then. Uh, Thank you, folks. I also had a great time preparing for this entire session. Great time speaking and conversing with all of you. Uh, we'll be in touch that ways. I am already on that app which the SSCI team has rolled out. What is the name of the app? Discourse, right? Discord. So I'm already there. In case, yeah, in case if you have any doubts, then do ask the SSCI team to consolidate your doubts and send it off to me. I can answer them at a later point of time in one go for all of you together. Okay. Okay then. SSCI team, I think this is the end of today's session. We have overshot uh, by almost an hour now. and I think it is time to close.